Ready to go? All right, good morning, everybody. Council, here we are at one of our council quarterly strategic work sessions. This morning, we've got a number of items on our discussion. We're going to talk about curbside management, future forward, invest DSM update, ION update on police projects, and council board updates. Mr. Manager, I'll quickly turn it over to you.
All right. I'll just take a moment and ask John to come on up and introduce him first, and we'll get right started.
All right. Good morning, Mayor and members of the council. My name is John Davis, City Traffic Engineer for Des Moines. And I have here with me Carly Seifhart, who is our consultant for this project. She represents the firm Fear and Peers. So we're going to talk about the topic of curbside management and go through a little bit of the background for that here. So really, when we're talking curbside management, we're talking about the curbside, the physical terms, the side of the road or the sidewalk that's nearest to the curb. The management involves the planning, measuring, managing, allocating, and enforcement of the uses and the users of the curb. And this is unique from the bike network or what commonly is called road diets, when we reduce the number of lanes that are, or reallocate the road uses. So why are we developing this guide or a framework? It's really, as I saw it, is a next step in our transportation planning efforts. It was a step in preparation for changes that we're anticipating and contemplating in the downtown streets as a result of Connect Downtown and Move DSM. And based on the experiences that we've had with managing the curb or dealing with requests for a loading zone, parking, passenger loading zones, a variety of different uses, we needed to have some consistency, a guidance and a framework to manage those curb uses in the various sub-areas of the Des Moines parking meter district, principally the downtown area, as well as be transferable to other areas of the city as those similar requests present themselves. So the reasons why we manage the curb is because the curb is the front door to most destinations. It's a connector for transportation options. It's one of our largest and limited public resources. And it's a place where a growing number of competing and new demands exist. For example, a business would like to have a loading zone, but at the same time, they want parking on street. There's a little bit of a conflict there because you can't have necessarily a loading zone and parking, or you need to be able to figure that out and make choices. And you can't have a loading zone for every business on a block because then you would have no parking. So it's also a tool to achieve our community goals. The objectives of curbside management is to provide a sense of equity in the allocation and management of the curbs, to customize for a variety of needs, should be easy to use and understand, clarify and add clarity to decision making, and be adaptable so we can adjust to various needs over time. The study area that we used for this development of a framework was the downtown parking meter district, which is you see outlined here. This is our study area that we drew upon the experiences. We have most every type of curb use in this area that we could examine and include into the framework. So this time I'll turn it over to Carly, who will present.
Great. Thank you, John, for that background. So I'll talk about the curbside management plan process, its recommendations, and the next steps for implementation. So the first step of the process was to do a really thorough existing conditions analysis where we mapped the uses of the curbs today, street classification, the modal hierarchy in previous plans to understand kind of what's this current state of the curb. From there, we looked at Move DSM, Connect Downtown, understand the foundational elements that we'll be building upon as a part of this effort. And then we looked at best practices around the country. We looked specifically at Cincinnati and San Jose to understand lessons learned from their curbside management efforts and how we could bring those best practices to Des Moines. Then we held focus groups with business owners, residents, event coordinators, an internal city working group to understand the processes of making changes to the curb and where we saw opportunities to improve efficiencies of the curb. And then lastly, field observations to kind of understand what data wasn't capturing and what were those near misses and kind of mismatches of supply and demand. From there, that informed our recommendations and the next steps for implementation. So just a recap of the key takeaways from the existing conditions analysis. We understood through mapping the existing curb uses that on-street parking was the most common curb use. We also saw the modal hierarchy and this layered network that Connect Downtown identified and wanted to make sure that that aligned with our recommendations. We also looked at the field observations that staff went out and performed, as well as crash data. We saw a lot of double parking, specifically with loading vehicles, where they weren't able to find loading zones that were either frequent enough or in the right places. So we saw double parking, which creates a lot of safety concerns for all modes of transportation and a lot of non-compliance. From San Jose and Cincinnati, we saw a lot of emphasis of people over vehicles, especially on blocks with commercial land uses where we wanted to see higher turnover. So from that information, we informed our curb menu. So we documented all of the curb uses that are in the study area that John identified today. So this list should look familiar to you. These are on the ground currently. And then we took our existing conditions, our best practices, and we identified future land uses. So in the slightly darker blue, these are identified for shorter term implementation sometime in the next couple of years, whereas in the faded, this is for longer term implementation. So where we're seeing the state of the practice of transportation going and things that we think Des Moines should consider in the longer term future. Before implementing any of these uses, there would be required changes to the code, changes to legislation, changes to the market in Des Moines currently. So these aren't specifically being identified to be put on the ground tomorrow. There's a few steps that would need to take place before they would be implemented, but we wanted to make sure to embody the kind of best practices in this field. So the next step was to develop a typology. So we made a matrix of street classification and land use and categorized every block in the study area into one of 5 categories based off of those 2 characteristics. Then we brought together the typology along with the curb menu and prioritized every curb use in the curb menu based off of its typology. So in a block that's a commercial corridor, we'll see a higher priority for higher turnover uses, lower time limit parking, uses that prioritize people over in a neighborhood avenue where we're going to see a priority for longer term vehicle storage or parking. So this helped guide typical blocks. So for each of the 5 typologies, we've developed a block similar to the one shown in this example for mixed-use mobility corridors. And this block will help guide the city moving forward to understand what curb uses should be in which types of blocks, what is the ratio of those different curb uses to each other, how long should each curb use be, and where on the block should each curb use be. So flex zone, this is for passenger loading, commercial loading, private vehicle loading. We're going to want that to be on the end of the block so we can have easy entry and exit, whereas private vehicle storage is going to be more of the middle of the block. So bringing this all together in an example, we're showing the block on East Locust west of East 2nd here, where today on the north side of the block we have 4-hour paid parking. On the south side of the block we have no parking with a bus stop. So when we look at the typology, we see that this is a commercial center, and then using the reference of the typical block, we can understand how do we want to make recommendations to the changes of these existing conditions. So with that, we're recommending a flex zone. This is just an example, a theoretical example, but in this example, we would have a flex zone at the far end of the block and a loading zone on the south side at the far end of the southeast corner, and then a flex zone on East Locust. So this would allow more access to the curb and better utilize this really valuable space. So we have lots of ideas for what the curb could look like in the future, but what are going to be the triggers that are going to cause us to look to make changes to the curb? So we've got a few examples here in this graphic. The first is development. So if a new development is going to come in, we're going to ask the developer to understand how this new development and its land use is going to cause changes to demand to the curb. So what's the land use today? What is in the future? And are we seeing a change? Are we going to need more loading zones? Maybe considering some of our future uses like a parklet if it's a restaurant. So we've documented in this plan the process that the developer would go through in order to kind of understand these potential changes to the curb and the process of working with the city to potentially make those changes a part of the development process. And that starts with the pre-application meeting. The second catalyst for change is a capital project. If you're already doing a corridor project, making a change to a block or a longer segment of a corridor, you're going to incorporate curbside management into that process. There's cost efficiencies of doing this. If curb and gutter are already being removed, often kind of making changes to the curb would require changes to curb and gutter. And so there's a cost efficiency of incorporating curbside management into capital projects, studies, plans, and designs. Routine maintenance, we just wanted to document here, will not be a catalyst for changes to the curb. These are things like street sweeping, paving, and there's less of a cost efficiency here. The next is proactive judgment. So getting ahead of things like crashes, non-compliance, citizen complaints. So we've identified what those performance measures are that should be assessed over time, and then what those thresholds are. So if there's 3 crashes on a block over three years, then that's a cause for city staff to look at that block and see if that template is different than today's conditions and if changes to the curb should be made. And hopefully with this, we're kind of right-sizing the curb in order to have the appropriate number of loading zones, reducing that double parking, and therefore improving safety. And then the last is reactive judgment. So this is if we get if the city gets a request from a business or resident to make a change to the curb in front of their property. So for that process, we've created a tool for each curb use depending on the request being made. So in this example, a business is requesting a passenger loading zone. City staff will look to this tool to ask the questions in order to understand if it's appropriate to make that change that's being requested. There's still an element of subjectivity to this decision, so we've documented that in this scoring tool to understand that there's professional and engineered judgment behind these decisions. And what this does is it increases transparency, it increases standardization, so it streamlines the process for city staff, and it makes it more clear to the business making the request why the decision was made. So what are the implications and the cost to implementation? So actually making those changes to the curb will vary. It depends on the change to the curb that's being made. If it's going from an on-street parking space to a loading space, that's relatively cheap or inexpensive, so more on the spectrum of $300, a sign change, a little bit of striping. If it's a parklet, which is in your future set of curb uses, that could be more expensive. There's more hard infrastructure, concrete, landscaping even as a part of that effort. The cost of assessing to determine if changes need to be made to the curb will vary. So for the reactive changes, we anticipate a time savings. So right now, this is happening today, but for city staff, they kind of alter the process depending on the business making the request. There are more meetings than with this tool that will streamline that process. If development, a change to the curb is made because of development, that burden or that additional time is on the developer, and we anticipate that not being a significant amount of additional time. For capital projects, also a minimal amount of additional time, kind of streamlining that into the project scope and budget as well. And then the proactive changes to the curb. This is the one that's going to be slightly more time consuming. You'll see on the bottom, I put another jurisdiction. Atlanta just finished their curbside management plan. They anticipated 1 full-time additional staff in association with managing their curb. Much larger study area, much more complex process that they've identified here. So for Des Moines, we've anticipated around 80 hours. We are, as John will talk about in the next steps, going to be digging into this a little bit further, but don't anticipate a significant amount of additional staff time to proactively look at those performance measures and perform a spatial analysis to determine those blocks that would be turned over. So I'll hand it over to John to talk about next steps.
All right, so some of our next steps in the implementation will be looking to come back to council to adopt the framework. We are going to have a process to inform and educate stakeholders of the new process. This afternoon, we're going to reconvene the focus groups that we conducted at the beginning of this study and bring them up to speed, much as we have presented to you this morning. We'll also be developing a communications and an education plan. We'll be looking to formalize the data collection and the monitoring program that we might implement, and then develop an on-street and off-street parking pricing guidelines. Really what this is going to drive at is we have an area, for example, that is presently signed as 2-hour parking from, say, 9 to 4 p.m., and the desire is to create a metered parking scenario. What is the price? How do we price that curb? Does it fit in the 25 cent an hour, 12-hour period, or is it $1.25, 4-hour framework, or is it something else? So we want to develop that in concert with what is happening at that curbside, but also what is the other parking that is available, especially in the downtown area where we have garages and off-street parking opportunities. So developing some guidelines for that, for future changes that we might want to undertake. And then we'll also look to pilot some of the curbside uses and strategies to see how they play and what adjustments we might need to make in the implementation or the decision-making process that we have set forth in this framework and guidance document. So with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Mayor, real quick, John, some of the most complaints that I get is snow. And when they park where the snow is sitting right on the curb, and you either have to walk through it or walk over it, and as we start piling up snow, what's our policy? How does that, I didn't see anything in here about that, of how we're going to. I know when it piles up really high, we have Public Works come in and I think that's happened once in 8 years, but I mean, that is a complaint that I hear continuously. And
Yes.
I don't see anything that addresses that in here.
This is more of looking at a framework of how we make decisions to change the curb uses. The maintenance or the operational element, that would be a separate matter that we would need to talk with Operation Downtown and Public Works.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I mean, we can talk about changing it, but if it doesn't work when there's snow on the ground, we're still going to get the same complaints. That should be part of this conversation also.
We'll certainly be mindful of that and add that into from the implementation side.
Yeah, that should be part of it. Thanks.
Indira, anything?
Such a study. Thanks for the information, because I think it helps give you clarity and a framework that we can give to our developers, which I think is always helpful, so everybody knows.
I think just for clarity, we don't currently have a process for assessing, like, for doing a curb study versus like we do traffic studies, we do this and that other thing, but we don't have like a curb study process that would need to be developed.
That is correct.
Okay. Do we know how long it would take to develop that?
This is part of the framework, and the guidance document is really what's going to be used for the basis of that. The study, so to speak, would depend on the length of that, would depend on the conditions that are being presented by the developer, what is present already on street. But this will be the framework and the basis for the decision making that would result from that effort or that study.
Okay. So really the only cost that we're seeing is in those proactive, where we would, like, something is already established and there's requests for a change, or, you know, we're running into issues, and so we would proactively go out, and that would be some cost for the study that wasn't involved in a development agreement or a street project or something like that, and then a cost to change it, depending on how much we needed to do.
Yes.
Okay, that's just an additional. Okay, great. Yeah, this
I've got
wonderful performance or presentation.
I've got a question, because this kind of bleeds over into some of the other areas. Councilmember Mandelbaum and I have been talking about some of the parking east of ML King and what needs to happen on Ingersoll High Street, and then some of the issues that have sort of developed heading west on Ingersoll, for instance, because there's been apparently some parking studies and whatever that have been done because there's been some huge changes. And is I have people calling me, and I'm sure the rest of us sometimes do also, about their concerns. And case in point, the retailers and a bunch of people from 35th to 38th Street noticed that this redesign has taken 19 parking spaces off the north side of the street on Ingersoll. And there's not a lot of parking in front of some of these businesses up and down there, and they are concerned. And most of them were not contacted before these changes were implemented. So as we look at our parking and curbs and street, how we make them safe and all that, which is so important, I think we need to involve everybody as opposed to just, I'm not quite sure how some of this stuff evolves because sometimes it appears and without a broader discussion. And of course, as I look at the Ingersoll deal with all those bump outs, although I see there's sort of an interesting solution at the moment, there's lots of curb damage because the plows have been hitting them. But now it appears as though they got somebody else privately doing some of the cutouts around the bump outs and whatever. Is that going to be how we handle not only downtown, but these other areas that we're doing this?
I think that's definitely, to also Councilmember Gatta's point, that needs to be part of the implementation and a discussion with Public Works, as well as in the cases where we have improvement districts that are sharing or doing maintenance activities with regards to the streetscape or other elements that are included. But it definitely is something that needs to be included. And I think this framework will help us when we have those public engagement opportunities on projects. That when we have concepts that we're going out and we are involving reallocating the curb to curb uses that are on a street, this will provide us another tool and a point of reference to help identify what should be out there and then have those discussions in the public setting at an open house or a workshop prior to the preliminary design elements occurring for a particular road project or street project.
Did you not do that for Ingersoll?
I
Here yet, so.
I personally cannot speak to that because I was not here.
So this would help clarify what's going on, not only downtown, but it would be a guide wherever, I mean, it's commercial area, whatever. So this would help be that guide, set the standard. So if businesses come forward and they want to change, then this would be your guide, right?
Exactly.
Kind of, the mayor's question spurred a thought in my mind. Is there involved in this process a way to evaluate surrounding parking, like existing parking behind, like off-street parking, like behind building parking, parking in the general area, like, and what the availability is for that when it comes to considering changes in the curb layout?
This framework by itself does not necessarily look to that. This is primarily looking at the curb uses on street. However, if you're evaluating parking in a general area, then you would apply this framework and guidance for the on-street element, but then you would also look and seeing what is your overall parking supply that is available, whether it's on-street or off-street.
So do we kind of already have a process for that, or at least like capacity to be able to handle that if there was a parking issue, essentially, to come in and say, oh, we're going to evaluate all the parking and then use this framework to determine what happens on the curb?
We'd have to do that on a case-by-case basis, and our capacity may be that we would engage a private consulting firm to help us with some of that, or depending on the circumstance, whether to be a developer, we may look to have the developer do that as part of the development concept process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody have anything else? Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Future Forward, is that next, Mr. Manager?
Yes. Yes, so the council asked for an opportunity to hear more about the Future Forward, and so we quickly brought our partners together to do that for today and squeezed it into our agenda. So first and foremost, thank you for our representatives from the partnership and others that have come to help speak through this. Obviously, there's been an incredible amount of input that's been given in this process over quite a few months, going close to a year almost now at this point. And very sophisticated input that has led to this plan that we can now insert into our comprehensive plan. So it's much like we do with other areas separately. Think of Connect Downtown, moving DSM plans, things of that nature that help us when we craft our overall comprehensive plan. So this will be a valuable tool in that effort. So I'll turn it over to Matt and Tiffany.
Mayor, County, members of the council, thank you. Matt Anderson, Deputy City Manager. Tiffany, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Tiffany Tauschak. I'm the COO at the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and I also wear the hat as president of Downtown DSM Inc., which is a subsidiary of the partnership. Thanks for your time today.
So, as Scott said, we will be presenting an overview of the Downtown Future Forward plan. This was put on the agenda pretty late, and unfortunately, members from the RDG team, who are our consultant and the author of the plan, they were not available to present today. So we ditched that B team. You've got the A team here. We have actually commandeered a presentation that RDG had put together. So this is not our presentation. I think it was probably formatted for about a 45-minute or an hour presentation. We're going to condense it down. It's going to feel like we're going kind of fast. We'll leave time at the end for questions. I don't want you to feel like this is your only opportunity to engage us, because it's going to be brief. So if over the course of the next couple weeks, if you have more questions that you have for us, just reach out to me. And Tiffany and I, or Scott, or the RDG team, we're happy to sit down and dive a little deeper into any of the aspects that you'd like. I first want to thank Polk County for their partnership in this. This has been a three-way split between the partnership group, Polk County, and the city on getting this done. It's been about a 2-year effort. I think we should be able to answer all your questions. Over the course of the last 2 years, Tiffany and I probably have hundreds of hours invested in this and dozens of meetings. So I think we can do a good job. Before I get started, I want to address what this plan is and what it is not. Number one, it is not a new CIP for you. It is a plan. It is a roadmap. It will not supersede anything that you currently got in your plan or any of the workload that staff currently has on their docket. The roadmap, if it's adopted in 2 weeks by you, we'll put the map in the glove box and leave it there until we need it. What we will do then is, as new city infrastructure projects come down the line, is new private development hits any of these geographic areas or any of the 6 theme areas that we're going to talk about, we're going to pull the roadmap out of the glove box and we're going to look at it and make sure that we're headed in the right direction. That's all this is. Now, every year as Scott and staff sit down and present a new CIP to you, a new 5-year priority of our capital budget, we're going to open this plan up and see if it's time to put any of those elements into the CIP and make that recommendation to you. Then it will be up to you to balance those needs of the skywalks and the green spaces downtown with the priorities that you have in the neighborhoods too. So it will be a document that we'll crack open when we need it, but it's not going to affect what you have as your priorities today. So I think it will provide that good framework. it's a big plan. We're not going to do everything in the plan. I'll tell you that right now. We don't have the time. We don't have the money, but it's going to guide us. The plan has a shelf life of about 12 years or so. So we'll revisit it, after this next kind of generation of development and evolution downtown, and we'll see where we need to go from there. This last plan we've been working on has had about that 12 to 15-year shelf life. So this is the new plan to drive us forward for the next decade or so. So
Great.
we will launch in. If Tiffany and I have done a 10-minute dry run of this, so if it doesn't feel perfectly orchestrated like John's plan was, it's not. So bear with us.
Thanks, Matt, for
Yes.
stepping in and stepping up as always. The RDG team may be on the phone. If so, Laura, Marty, can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for calling in. So again, just want to reinforce our thanks to each of you for your time and consideration. You may recall we were here, about 6 months ago talking about the plan. Well, we're at a place where we have this proposed final plan. P&Z has reviewed it, and now we would like for City Council to review and adopt this plan. I'd like to especially thank the mayor, who was one of the chairs of this initiative. Also, many of you participated in just, again, the broad community input sessions that we had, focus groups, online surveys, pop-up activations, you name it. Each and every one of you played a different role in providing some feedback in different ways. But we also want to share with you just the overall partners involved, as well as the community as a whole that came together on this vision for the future of our downtown. So first, sharing with you our partners. So Matt mentioned, of course, you have been a wonderful partner. Want to thank Scott and Matt and the entire city team in particular. We've spent, again, many hours, many meetings talking through all of this, which has been incredibly helpful and meaningful. Also, Polk County, Bravo, Greater Des Moines, Catch Des Moines, DART, MPO, Downtown Chamber, Fuse DSM, and of course, Operation Downtown. I do have some members of our Operation Downtown and partnership team here in the room with us today in case you have additional deep dive questions you'd like to ask some of the other leaders. So just a quick overview of the process and a reminder of how we got here. As Matt stated, this has been about a 2-year process. We originally began this process and conversation in 2019. In early 2020, we stopped, paused, regrouped, and then decided to re-engage and move forward. And with that, we have a lot of community input that we're really proud of, the intentionality and time spent in ensuring that we were working to engage, again, intentionally with community members. So this is the most inclusive, community-driven plan that downtown has ever had. We have had about 8,000 individuals that have weighed in on the future of our downtown. And want to share with you today some of the themes that we heard, as well as some of the vision from the community about what our downtown could look like. But also, to Matt's point, want to just reinforce that there is a lot of stitching together of existing plans and initiatives in this plan. So there are some new elements, but there is a lot of existing work that's really lifted up, but it's bringing it all together so that we really have a fluid, cohesive vision for what the future of downtown could look like. So regarding the public engagement, this gives a snapshot. I won't go into each of these, but I do want to lift up, again, our steering committee as well as our Future Forward Council. Our Future Forward Council, this was a unique approach that the steering committee and city, county, and others came together on. It was designed to ensure that we were engaging with individuals that were historically represented and left out of past plans. We were very intentional in ensuring that we were finding ways to connect with individuals and give them not only a seat at the table, but a voice throughout this entire process. And I would say, as we are, if with your blessing, able to move into implementation, those individuals will again be invited to participate in implementing as we move forward.
Can I ask you to dive a little bit into like how you gave people a seat at the table and a voice?
Thank you so much. Yes. So here's a couple of photos that just give a snapshot. We were very intentional, again, in going to meet people where they were in the community. These are just a few pictures and examples, but we provided a diverse opportunity of engaging with the community through different times, different days. We were making sure we were thinking about individuals that may have different work schedules, not the typical 8 to 5, making sure we're thinking about people that don't have daycare or childcare. So we provided some kids activities at different pop-ups and activations. We literally walked the streets of downtown asking people for their input, set up shop in the skywalks, and also had a number of media stories and coverage to really drive that online input as well. So we were trying our best to ensure that we were finding ways to meet people where they were and invite them to participate in as much as they would like to. Does that help answer the question, dear? Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Here are some of the input themes that we heard. Overall, the community has asked for us to really enhance inclusivity, vibrancy, and choice. They're asking for improved mobility, connectivity for all. The word connectivity, connection came through over and over again, not just in terms of space, but also in terms of people connection and connection, public-private partnership connection. So we also heard through the themes the increased option for access to goods and services, having additional entertainment gathering options. You'll see a little bit more about that as we go into the future 6 initiatives that are proposed. The continued really celebration of diverse cultural experiences year-round. We did some deep dive studies into that, have data surrounding that, as well as preserving, maintaining, celebrating all of our existing assets. And finally, adapting to continued workforce changes. So with that, we did conduct a workforce trends and occupancy study. We will be doing that again this year. You will be invited as the city to participate should you want to. And that is a way for us to really understand the knowledge worker, what they're looking for, how can we draw them back into offices and draw them back into downtown even more so. So here's the snapshot that we learned from January of 2022. But this year we'll have a snapshot from 2023 to share with you. One quick note. As of last week, we are averaging 83% from a foot traffic perspective for downtown compared to pre-pandemic levels. So we're at 83% of pre-pandemic levels foot traffic downtown DSM. National average is 49%. So that's an impressive story. It's not good enough. We know we need to keep pushing. We need to get more people out supporting local businesses and working together. But we were pleased to see that continued trend line moving up in that 83%. We also learned through this study and ongoing input from the community that individuals said they would spend more time, they would spend more money supporting local if we continue to enhance our downtown and follow these recommendations that many have provided. We noted earlier, just this plan really does stitch together more than 40 existing plans. It also identifies what are those areas of opportunity that we haven't as a community touched yet, but need to really lift up and work on. And what are some of those elements that maybe aren't as relevant anymore? And again, we worked very closely with city staff on all of this, and we have cataloged, if you're interested, a deeper dive into how all of those different plans feed into this plan. We did identify a vision for the future of downtown. Again, we were intentional in ensuring that this was quick, but also had a very deep meaning. So we provided definitions for those key phrases and words, wanting to make sure people understood what we were meaning as we were saying that downtown DSM is the destination for inclusive opportunities and welcome surprises. And then also from a framework perspective, we as the steering committee and the Future Forward Council were ensuring over and over again that we were looking at the plan through different lenses, including inclusivity, vibrancy, choice, sustainability, economic vitality, and wellness. One quick note, wellness does include safety, as that is an element that we continue to discuss, of course, in our city. The plan goals, again, really building on past and current plans, pull them all together, stitch them together so we have a cohesive and very exciting future for our downtown for the next 10 to 15 years. And as we all know, plans continue to evolve and change. We have to respond to the needs of the market, the needs of the community. This does give us a roadmap for that. Included in that are a welcoming urban neighborhood, inclusive arts and entertainment, rewarding market for development, vibrant outdoor city, and again, the connected and sustainable mobility. One more thing, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
You're doing great.
So one other element that makes this plan unique is that we were sure, I'm saying we as in the steering committee and Future Forward Council, had a lot of discussion about the boundaries of downtown. One of the things that that we as a group decided is that we did not want to put boundaries around downtown. We felt it was very, very important to ensure that this is everyone's downtown. We're not drawing lines as to who is in or out of the downtown boundary. Rather, this is a quick visual snapshot of how we see the downtown working through with those surrounding communities, knowing that our downtown will be stronger if we are more inclusive of those surrounding communities and having those strong neighborhoods. You'll see that referenced throughout the plan, but wanted to call out again that very distinct difference between this plan and past plans, and making sure that we want to build this out so that this is a downtown that is reaching to, with, and alongside the surrounding community. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to
Yes.
dive into the Future 6
Thank you.
initiatives.
Okay, so throughout this 2 years, we eventually kind of distilled all of our thoughts into these 6 driving factors here that you see, these 6 initiatives. We'll hit each one of them. Actually, we'll hit into the first one. So the first was the green ring. So looking at the recreational opportunities and the connections that we can make, and I think there's another slide that'll talk on this, is that we have a lot of great kind of what we call pearls on the necklace, but they're not really connected very well. The green ring is that initiative to get better connectivity of these great freestanding projects that we have throughout the downtown. This is one example, 15th Street by Exile, of what you could do to green that, make it more connectivity, more friendly connectivity. In this instance, between the Sculpture Park and the redevelopment of the Dyko area, how could you make that a more connecting connection, more inviting connection? Actually, if you go back real quick, this is what I talked about it being a roadmap. This doesn't mean we're going to go out tomorrow and put this in the CIP and build this. And again, it's a really great looking rendering of what it could be. But as we do infrastructure projects, we will look at this roadmap and say, oh, this would be a great spot to build and implement parts of that green ring. So it's that guiding document. Skywalks Reimagined. Councilman Mandelbaum we had many vigorous discussions on skywalks. You know, there's a love-hate relationship with our skywalks. They're here to stay. And what do we do with them? How do we improve the safety, the experience, the visuals, the simple things of the heating and cooling, and the connectivity, and how do you balance the street life with the skywalk life? And everybody seemed to have an opinion on them. One quick thing to remind people is that the skywalks are kind of a dual ownership. We own the bridges over the right-of-way, so anything that goes over a street is owned by us. Everything else is owned by the individual property owner in that block. So we call them corridors and bridges. We don't own the corridors. So it's a partnership with us and the private community, many different owners, to try to manage the skywalk system. One of the big things on the previous slide is how do we improve the vertical connectivity? I mentioned that interaction between the skywalk and the street level. It's something that we admittedly have not done a very good job of. Unless you're from here, if you're a visitor, it's hard to know how to get up into the skywalk. Sometimes it's hard to know how to get out. That improved signage, that improved visibility, like this has done, the kind of the red theme and the S of really being that beacon of how you get up and down within the skywalk system. This was you're going to see some ideas of playing on themes of some different kind of lateral movement of not necessarily at the street level. So this is New York City, where they took a former train line, converted it into a linear park. There's this kind of linear park theme that RDG has drawn on, but within the skywalk system. And reimagining it in a color-coded theme of different themed areas, parks, art, food, performances, water, and so on, of how you could get along, similar to like a subway system where it's color-coded like that, kind of the sense of place within the nodes of the skywalk. And again, we alone, as just a bridge owner, can't drive any of these ideas. If you could forward to. So here's an idea of how you could reimagine a skywalk. Pretty plain vanilla box, right? It's white and gray. It gets the job done, but it's nothing that you really get excited about. Or Could you get excited about it through art, through interior landscaping, plants, interactive art within the Skywalk system itself? We aren't likely to drive these transformations as the city. But if a property owner came to us and said, hey, you know what, it's time to reinvest in my corridor within my block, I'd like to do something like the image on the screen or whatever they may have in mind, city, would you be a partner with us on your bridges that are coming into my property? That would be something that we would bring to you and consider, and how do we partner with the private sector in reimagining the skywalks?
Matt,
Yes, sir.
before you leave this skywalk discussion, when you reimagined the skywalks, did you reimagine downtown without skywalks?
We did. Maybe Councilman Mandelbaum could talk about that. Yes, we did talk about that. Interestingly, a strong advocate for the skywalks was Catch Des Moines and Greg Edwards. The value that the skywalks have for visitors, particularly those using the Iowa Event Center and the ability to connect to hotels. So we did have that discussion, Councilman Voss, and it was a lively discussion. And it's not the interesting thing, the difficult thing is if we were to decide, we don't want the skywalks anymore. You can't really snap your finger and get rid of them. We don't own them, a lot of the corridors. So, and I know a lot of people do value them. They see the value in the connectivity to parking and the ability to shelter from inclement weather, and to Mr. Edwards' point, the ability for out-of-towners to get around.
Well, so Cincinnati removed theirs over a series of years. They used the Minneapolis model also. They got their last portion of the skywalk removed in 2020. I just wonder if the skywalks have, the value has been outlived, and it's time to take another look at it and see what downtown Des Moines would look like without those. When you try to compare the Highline Trail, and I think I've been on it on eight different trips to New York, so that is an outdoor experience. Correct. I'm just struggling with this. If you chat with anyone who runs or walks from the YMCA, the number of people that are using the skywalk, where they sleep, where they, because there aren't restrooms, are using the skywalks as a restroom. We're in a spot where you either have to go one way or the other. I just want to make sure that there's a strong case to really consider eliminating the skywalks.
We did have that discussion. We had that, the consensus, I don't know that it was an overwhelming consensus, but the consensus of I think it was almost 8,000 people that were involved in our outreach and the input, was that there was still value to the skywalks in Des Moines.
Yeah, when I read in your report about pop-up shops and kind of like, really? I mean, where's the traffic to get people to come downtown to go to a pop-up store in the skywalk? I'm struggling with this part of it.
As he struggles, Connie's got her hand up.
Yes.
It is a love-hate. If you worked downtown like I did, you loved them because you could get around. And if you would do something like interactive art, this is where you could really do some great pieces and enhance it so people maybe would come down. I think we need to promote it as, walking in the winter. I mean, but I think it is a connectivity. I just think we need to do a better job of how we're envisioning them. So you can say tear them down. I think they're valuable for Des Moines if done right. And it's reimagining what they initially were for connecting retail. But I do think the connectivity to get things back down on the street is important. Instead of putting the retail like they had done in the past up on the second floor or the, kaleidoscope, it should all been on the street. So it brought an opportunity to walk down, and then you could get connected both ways. So I think if you do more of that, it would be helpful.
I think you hit on the point, which was if it's done right. I would think we would all agree today it's not done right.
I mean, if we're going to encourage people to come down and walk on the skywalks and be open for street people, let's put some porta pots on the skywalk.
Well, I mean,
I know.
the pictures that I sent you 2 days ago, I mean, those are the issues that we hear.
Yes.
And I understand both of their viewpoints, but I mean, I don't know how we do a better job of an abandoned building where they're being vandalized, and I mean, that doesn't showcase our city very well with some of those pictures.
Agreed.
To provide another perspective, I think the skywalks offer us a really great resource in extremely cold, extremely dangerous, inclement weather for like just a place for people to go to be out of that weather like immediately. And so I think that they do provide an important resource, and that needs to be part of the discussion. But I think to Connie's point, like we're not going to be discussing, either building this installation or tearing them down today, and it would be a cost either way. That isn't really what we're deciding right now. I think that whenever we do have this conversation, we need to figure out ways to balance both of those viewpoints, ways to balance not taking away from street retail, but then also having the benefits that we do get from the skywalks. And I think that diving into that, we will be able to sort of find that middle point and find that balance. And it obviously needs to be part of the discussion because it's a big part of downtown. So
Do we do a better job of the maintenance and keeping up with some of the things that are happening inside there? I mean, how do we implement that as part of this discussion? And maybe you
That's a
can
great
jump in.
question, because we did recognize that the governance is part of the issue. There are more than 30 different agreements, well over that, and they have their own terms. And so I would indicate that it's time to consider a start over, reset on how the governance is worked, at least, so that the maintenance can be addressed, because there needs to be an enforcement aspect to it that's much stronger than
Yeah, I
it
mean,
is today
it
for
can't
private
be
property.
just Operation Downtown having to clean it up all the time. I mean, that's not fair to them. That's not fair to all of us that are, putting money into Operation Downtown to take care of a small portion of the skywalk system that consistently is the problem. And so, however we need to address that, I think we should start working on that ASAP, because that's an issue, and it's been going on for years, and I consistently get pictures and people complaining about them, and I mean, it's not pretty. I mean, so.
I think that does bring up a good point that I don't think was addressed in this plan, was the lack of public restrooms downtown. And so maybe when we're talking about skywalks, that can be part of the conversation.
Yes, Councilman Mandelbaum has been pushing it. It is mine and Tiffany's 2023 topic to tackle is public restrooms downtown.
Great. Love to hear it.
Okay, we have 5 minutes. I want to be respectful of Amber's time coming up at 9:30, so we are going to whiz right through here. Second is the inner circle. This is really kind of your downtown core, creating a new loop of family-oriented residential districts. There's a significant amount of residential in this district, and redevelopment and connectivity of the Arena and Court Avenue districts, and how you kind of reclaim some of these areas that do need investment in surface parking lots and reclaiming 4th Street. There was an emphasis up on Keogh and 9th, which is kind of it's an area we all drive through, but we overlook it, and it's a complex street network, as you can see up here. But you're starting to get a lot of growth up here. There's some residential townhome growth up here. We've got a coffee shop that needs some better walkability. The arts that's coming up in this area. So it's what was just a vehicular entrance into downtown is suddenly starting to become its own little pocket neighborhood in itself. So the next slide will show a kind of a revisioning, a greening, a better pedestrian connectivity of this area as we start to finally get residents and some service and more than just auto-oriented uses in the neighborhood.
Are we planning a flower festival? That sounds great.
Would love it. We have an events team, and that is throughout the plan. I'm sure you noted there are many elements and ideas related to pop-ups and activations, and that's something that our team really thrives at, and it really does work. We have the data to back it up, that these pop-ups and festivals bring people down.
This is the real value in our partnership those pop-ups, these festivals, the activations of downtown are something that the partnership team and the Operation Downtown team do really, really well. We don't have the staff in place to do that, so the public art pop-ups, the hot air balloons, those sort of things, all their team, and they do just a tremendous job. Those are the things that are going to bring the downtown workers who are working from home back downtown. And we heard that repeatedly. The Stadium District, not a lot of new ground here on the Stadium District, but just an understanding of the connectivity of having a pro soccer stadium and Principal Park with baseball, kind of anchoring these two ends with Tuttle Street being that connectivity. There isn't a really great cohesive way to tie those together, and it's the understanding of this linear development that's happening right now, and how can you make these two really important assets feel as they're more connected. And the idea is that white line that you see with the arrow to Principal Park. You have the natural connectivity along MLK, but which is more of an auto-oriented. There is a bike and ped trail, but how can you get that connectivity through the Grays Station and Grays Landing neighborhood and have a very pleasant walkable experience or bikeable experience between the two districts?
Is there anything after go back to the slide?
Great station.
Grays Station, yeah, there's pretty decent connectivity. There will be that connectivity from the Dyko site to about 11th, 9th. Then you kind of lose it. It starts to break up. And if you'll notice, when you're doing planning, you can take a lot of liberties. That white line goes through a building. So planning gets to do that. Doesn't mean we're going to do it. Doesn't mean we're going to tear down the building. But at some point, buildings have a lifespan of their own. When it's time to redevelop that block, this is our roadmap. We pull out the roadmap and say, hey, let's try to implement this idea and continue that great pedestrian connectivity. It's those single-story flex buildings that Hubble owns some, Eichner owns some. There's been some. Connected corridors. So attractive complete street corridors that connect the downtown core to surrounding neighborhoods. So this is that connectivity into the neighborhoods that we had talked about earlier. The 9th Street Bridge I was really happy that RDG pointed this out to us. We were kind of oblivious to it. You drive across it, you don't think about it. But the next slide will show how you can create a more welcoming connection to the neighborhood to the north, up toward the DMAC campus. That really that United Way and DMAC campus should feel more like it's part of downtown. It's so close, but it feels so broken up and disconnected. How can you use these linear connections and make them feel like they are part of downtown? To Tiffany's point, so the downtown doesn't have hard boundaries, right? You don't have this edge. And how do you try to soften what is currently a hard edge?
I'm very excited about this section in the plan. This one of the 6, specifically 9th Street. Like this is this would be ideal and fantastic. So a point that we were just talking about was sound. Do we have considered sound as a barrier to making this as urban and livable as possible, and how that would be addressed?
I think that's a great point that we should include in our implementation plan. So each of the 6 initiatives would have its own implementation team.
Gotcha.
So would love to have additional input on how we carry that out through each of those. I think that's a great point.
And just don't give me credit for that. Give Carl credit for that. He brought it up.
Oh, thanks, Carl. Thanks.
The things that I think there's, for a project like this, potentially federal money from the new infrastructure bill. I've shared that with, I think, some staff, and Tiffany and I have talked about it, but like the reconnecting communities, like I think a project like this and some of the other pieces that were just highlighted on Keogh could be very good fits for that, and maybe a way that, when we talk about we haven't identified funds, if we're talking about implementation, those are dollars where I think the plans that are coming up through this process really fit well. And if we could put together an application either for, I think that comes in both a planning and then a capital piece. If we could start thinking about how we apply for something like that to get this done, I think that would be a good fit too.
Great. Okay, we're going to speed along. Again, strong neighborhoods and their connectivity and proximity to downtown. East 9th at Fremont was a node that often gets overlooked, but we think we can reinvigorate that area again, make it feel like it's part of downtown or at the fringe downtown. It's so close to the East Village, and how do you let some of that strength that's happening downtown kind of bleed over into a neighborhood like this?
I did want to talk about this last bit a little bit, because I think that it's very important. Like, one of the biggest concerns, especially for us ward council people, we don't have downtown, but downtown is obviously a destination for the entire city, or we want it to be. And so these connecting neighborhoods are going to be really important. Some of the build out of this item in the plan did concern me. And when you dive deep past the executive summary, there's some really, really great ideas that I would love to explore and flesh out. But there are some sort of like red flags that pop up for me in what was developed here. And specifically calling out one of the points was a marketing program using graphics and identification and materials promoting these nodes as a collective of distinctive places, and then incentives and venture capitalization for desirable business types occupying vacant and underused buildings. And those two in conjunction really just scream gentrification to me. And so that's very scary when we're talking about like one of the nodes identified with 6th and Forest. And we're talking about specifically called out the Good Park neighborhood and Cheatham Park neighborhood, both of which I just inherited in the redistricting. Those are areas with like high Black population, extremely high renter population. And I feel that like there is a whole lot of need to stabilize. And like I said, there were some really, really great ideas past the executive summary when we dive deep into this initiative. But I think we need to be very careful about how we go about doing that. And I didn't see the word gentrification mentioned anywhere in here. And I think that that needs to be specifically called out and specifically addressed. And I just would love the opportunity to sort of develop this part of the plan out a little bit more and start having those conversations, because this is between the housing piece that is called out a lot in this plan, like housing downtown, I think is really exciting and really, really important. I think the connection on the streets, and then I think this piece could be really, really valuable to us. It just depends on how we do it.
So I think the key is that as we go into these individual neighborhoods that have their own individual character, that we don't try to push our ideas onto the neighborhood, but instead we try to pull ideas out of the neighborhood. And how do we help the neighborhood implement their own ideas, not just smother them with our ideas. And I do think, as Tiffany said, each one of these 6 initiatives will have a project team. And I think I just heard you volunteer to be
I absolutely
on the
did.
team. So
I absolutely
we welcome your ideas. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
I think they're very good ideas.
Thank you.
And it's consistent with the fact we have a goal for density, and there are quite a bit of empty lots, too, that are going to be available. So we will end up at the end of the day with more affordable housing in these areas. I'm certain of that.
Absolutely. Okay, we are at the end. I think our last slide was next steps, since this was a little old presentation. Next steps of P&Z, already done. The recommendation is ready for you at your next council meeting. And then the implementation conversations on the six steps that we had talked about.
So appreciate your time, or any other questions you have. We're really excited about this plan, in part because this is what makes our community so special, is that we are reacting real time to issues, opportunities in our community, but we're also looking to the future, planning for the future. And the fact that this is the most inclusive plan, certainly we always have more work to do, but feel really good about this being a community-driven plan to help us see what the future could look like, so that we are continuing to be one of those downtown that's trending ahead of all those other downtowns nationally in terms of residential, foot traffic, projects, et cetera. Just this last year, we had 14 projects downtown. That is incredible progress, and just really appreciate the partnership that we have with you all and many others.
Thank you.
I want to just take a minute. We had some really good comments up here and hopefully some suggestions and opportunities for everybody to interact. But I want to thank you all for moving this whole project forward and having a vision and continuing the vision. Because some of us may remember there was a moment in time, and I look at Jay back here because I think he probably does, when there was an idea that maybe a great portion of downtown ought to be leveled and ought to look like maybe a suburban office park where, you know, you put a building in the middle of a block and you park all the way around it, and then we'll tear down another block and we'll do the same thing because that's what the future is. We didn't see that. And I say we, not only the city council and our planning commission, but the owners downtown, and remember what the East Village used to look like before we brought the owners and the visitors and the few residents that were together. What could this look like as opposed to false fronts going down Locust with an Army surplus store and a bunch of pretty seedy looking places. And as we look, that really is sort of a destination retail restaurant, whatever today. Plus, we decided, all of us working together, that maybe people ought to start living back downtown. And going from 1,700 people 20 years ago living downtown and planning and working and visioning with developers and others to now having nearly 17,000 living downtown. The living, working, participating, enjoying, being close to a lot of places and being walkable is very, very exciting. And I know that Carl's probably disappointed that the skywalks, we can't do bikes in the skywalk, so we apologize for that. But
Maybe we can.
yeah, we could maybe get some ramps or some people just ride right up there. But I think that as we continue this vision and look at what the future looks like, I will tell you that everybody working together has done such a phenomenal job in downtown. We know that there's some things we need to work on. Safety certainly is a huge issue everywhere, but downtown is. But I want you to know that those of us that occasionally get the chance to talk to national media, they love our downtown. They love downtown Des Moines. As we talk about some of the other things that are going on in our periphery communities, they say, no, the heart of Iowa, there in Iowa is downtown. It's right here. I don't know how you've done this, but here's part of the secret. And I told them, well, I'm not going to tell you. We don't want to reveal our secrets. But all of us working together have created a place that is recognized by the media is that that there's nothing like it from Chicago to Denver. That this is the place to recognize where people work, business grows, people live, there's enjoyment, and this is what happens when we work together. So let's keep up the good work. Thank you so much for all of it. As we talk about the continuing events, I remember when we were trying to figure out how to make it with Downtown Des Moines Incorporated, make everything more exciting, more invited, and we created 22 events, a few of which are still going. We did Skywalk Golf, but Farmers Market was one. And remembering the first day we did it when about 15 people showed up and we had about 5 vendors and it was raining. And everybody looked at me and said, you thought this is a good idea, why? But look at what's happened. Generally on the weekends we have pretty good luck and the weather's pretty good. Maybe a couple of times that we get a little sprinkle or whatever. But let's continue those events, those happenings. That's what makes this place such exciting and a good place. So thank you for all your work, and we'll keep giving you input.
Please
Welcome
do.
it, welcome it. Thank you.
Yes. Appreciate you. Thanks.
It'll be back on the, it'll be back on the agenda for the 6th.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Invest DSM looks like the next.
Yes, let's bring Amber up if she would. So we'd like to bring Amber in at least once a year. Sometimes we get her more than that.
I'm old school. I like these.
So I know that 3 of our council members sit on this board and are very well updated on this, but we clearly want to bring Amber in to share her good news with the entire council. So.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. I'm Amber Lynch. I'm Executive Director at InvestDSM. And it's hard to believe that it's already been 3.5 years since we started this little organization. I guess time flies when you're having fun. So I wanted to come and share what we've been up to. We've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, and 2022 was no exception to that. So today I really wanted to talk about kind of what the last year has looked like in our 4 special investment districts, and then a little bit about some of the big picture things we have on deck for 2023. So one of the things that we wanted to do when we put InvestDSM together was really start to drive value growth in some of our middle market neighborhoods in Des Moines. We wanted to see that our property values were increasing incrementally, keeping pace with inflation over time. And we also wanted to prompt investment in our older buildings. We have so many older homes and older commercial buildings across the city. There is financial capacity within our community, and so how do we unlock some of that financial capacity that exists and use it to protect our older building stock so that we can compete with the areas around us and continue to make those neighborhoods desirable places to live. So that's what our grant programs have really focused on. I'm going to start there. Of course, you're familiar with our Block Challenge program. This is just specific to InvestDSM's 4 special investment districts, so it does not include information on the city's Block Challenge program. We're slowing down a little bit in this program. We had great interest in it the first year that we rolled it out. That was really strong again in 2021, strong again in 2022, but it is starting to slow down because it's kind of our entry-level program. So for a lot of the neighbors in these neighborhoods, it's kind of the first stepping stone. They get a taste of a little bit of grant money to help them do exterior curb appeal improvements, and then they're moving on to do bigger projects and interior repairs on their homes. But still in 2022, we had 109 projects that we completed across 11 teams. We had teams in 3 out of our 4 special investment districts. We did not have any in Columbus Park this particular year. Total investment in 2022 was about $480,000. We're still seeing about $1.50 from property owners for every dollar that InvestDSM is putting in. And since we launched the program in spring of 2020, it's been a total of about $2.3 million invested in the curb appeal of these 4 neighborhoods. So that's pretty significant. We've touched a lot of properties, and that's starting to build momentum towards other things. I think other feedback that we hear about this program is just the opportunity that people are grateful for to connect with their neighbors, to get to know them better, to know them beyond just a wave hello on the street, but actually their names and, if they have kids or not, a little bit about their family. And so that's starting to build this overwhelming kind of sense of pride that people have about where they live, feeling connected to each other and to their neighborhood.
I have a question about this. Do you think that it's slowed down because of less need for the exterior improvements, or have we kind of just hit a wall with outreach and not quite reaching the other people who might need exterior improvements that you could reach?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think in Franklin and Drake, it is slowing down because people have taken advantage of it and they don't necessarily need to repeat it again. And we probably, now we're starting to identify blocks that we haven't touched yet over the past 3 years. And so we can do a little bit more targeted outreach in those areas to make sure people are aware that it's available to them. I think in Columbus Park and Oak Park, the story is a little bit different. It's more that neighbors don't know each other quite as well to begin with. They also may not always have the means to participate since we do it as a reimbursement. And so that's some of the things that we're trying to figure out. How do we tweak the program so that we can adjust it We have raised the matches and lowered the number of neighbors that are required to participate on a team in those two neighborhoods to try and make it a little bit more accessible. And then we're looking at playing with thresholds. Do we match 75% instead of 50%? So I think those are some of the things that we're looking at year over year as we go through the program.
Have you considered changing it from being a reimbursement to sort of fronting?
Potentially, it gets a little bit tricky because then how do we get repaid? We're trying to stay out of the situation of paying a contractor directly at the moment.
I see.
But it's certainly something that we could take a look at.
Have we matched our Block Challenge Grant program to the changes that they've made in thresholds?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
It's, I think the city's version is simplified as far as the number of neighbors that have to come together and the dollars that are matched. We have kind of two categories of that for different areas, and I think there's just one under the city's program,
Right.
last I knew. The difference the city has for lower income households gone up to that 75% match. We have not done that yet at InvestDSM.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay. So then the next step up from that for homeowners is our homeowner renovation program. Again, under this one, it's a matching grant, so we share the cost of anywhere from 20 to 50% of somebody's total renovation costs. They can do interior and exterior renovations through this program, and it's more individualized. So where we're not getting a ton of traction in Oak Park and Columbus Park under Block Challenge, where they have to work together, we are seeing consistent growth in the appetite for the individual homeowner renovation program in those two neighborhoods. This past year, we completed about 150 projects. There's a longer timeline on these projects, and of course, we had all the disruptions in the construction industry this past year with rising costs and contractor availability and all of the things. But we did see a lot of projects that started in 2021 finish out in 2022. And so of those about 150 projects that were completed, that was a total of about $5.6 million worth of investment. And so that brings our total to date since fall of 2020 to about $8 million worth of investment in our older homes across these 4 districts. Under this program, we're seeing a little bit higher match rate. And so for every dollar that we're putting in, homeowners are putting in about almost close to $2. And these numbers are as of the end of November. That's kind of when we close out our year for reporting purposes. So we're actually, I think last we pulled, we're up at about 8.5 million cumulative to date under this program. Our project volume has increased quite a bit, and so while we completed 149 projects last year, we managed over 500 somewhere in our pipeline. So we have another over 100 that are grants in progress right now under construction, and then around 250 that are somewhere in that application stage. We've got 2 construction specialists that are managing all of these projects, and then an administrative team that does all of the paperwork pieces of it. So it's keeping us very, very busy. But we do hear a lot of feedback from our homeowners about the program being easy to use and enabling projects that they wouldn't have been able to do on their own without the incentive. We also have an exit survey for those participants that's out right now, and so we'll start to bring some of those results into our strategic plan conversations with our board later this year, and also into our annual report that will come out in a couple of months. Moving on from that, so our single-family developer program is next. We do a lot fewer projects through this program, but about half a dozen per year. This year, we started to see some new construction projects come forward. These were through a partnership with NFC. So their properties arm, we sold vacant lots to them, and they then built the homes and sold the homes. We had 2 in Columbus Park and 1 in Oak Park. And then we had 2 rehabs that were both in Franklin this year that finished out. We have another 7 that are under construction, and then 5 that are kind of moving through that application phase. And with those new construction homes, we're starting to see some pretty significant changes in at least the market value. We don't have new assessments yet to be able to report on that. But in terms of the change from when we purchased the property at the beginning to what it has sold for at the end with either the new or newly renovated home, we're seeing some significant changes there, and prices per square foot, sale prices per square foot that are a little bit more in line with what you'd see across the metro. And they've been a variety of sizes as well. So on the new constructions, we were trying to add some larger product that you don't always get sometimes in our older neighborhoods. And then with the rehabs, we're able to sometimes add a bathroom or just reconfigure the floor plan in a way that is a little bit more attractive to home buyers coming in.
So for clarity, the rehabs, are these currently occupied, or were they unoccupied to do the rehab?
I know one was unoccupied to begin with. The one that was converted from a 3-unit back down to a single family, it was unoccupied and had lost its rental certificate. It was in pretty bad shape. And then the other one, I don't remember if that was, it was a for sale on the open market. So when the developer purchased it, it had been for sale, but I don't remember if it was sold by a homeowner or not, how they picked it up.
And the lowest sale price you've got is $280.
In this particular batch, yes.
In this batch?
In this particular batch, yes. Yep.
But this is pretty average, being around the 300 range?
For the size of the homes, yes.
Okay. So a lot of the benefit of this program really is creating that additional tax base, rising the value of surrounding properties.
Yes. Yes. And hopefully adding some housing product that isn't available in Des Moines neighborhoods. Right.
But this specifically, this program isn't really doing anything to build equity for existing homeowners. That's more the rehab projects.
Correct. Only insofar as, eventually these sale prices establish comps that sort of trickle out and affect assessed values overall. And so this is kind of the quickest way that we can do that. But there's also, if we do too much of this, that's when we start to see those huge price increases that we're trying to avoid. So there's a little bit of a balancing act between not doing too much of this and having too many, new $300,000 homes hit the market. We're trying to balance that out with helping existing owners fix up what they've got.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking long term, I'm thinking as we are thinking about expanding programs like this, we're not really able to get below that 250-ish price point with this kind of this process.
We had a couple of rehabs, and I'll get to that on a later slide, that InvestDSM owned and managed the rehab. We had 2 that sold right around $230,000. Okay. They were a little bit smaller homes, and so we're trying to have that kind of variety in the price points as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you bet. Our last 2 grant programs, these tend to be larger projects, and so we're still getting some of the final project costs in. But under our commercial grant program this past year, we completed 8 different projects. That brings us to 19 total to date. We're still seeing the majority of those in our Oak Park, Highland Park, 6th and Euclid Business District, but we are also getting investment in Drake and Dogtown as well. And then also a few here and there in Franklin. And we had one in Columbus Park with the American Legion this past year also. So these tend to be, we had the Varsity Cinema in here this year. That was a huge project, and so that's driving some of the numbers here. We were just a small piece of the funding for that project, but it's great to see that theater come back to life in the Dogtown area. And then rental rehab is a relatively new program for us. We just launched it last year, and so while we didn't complete any projects under this program in 2022, we do have 7 that are under construction and another 2 that are kind of coming through that application pipeline. So more on those next year.
Do we have rental rehab as part of what we do as well, or no? Okay, it's just
No.
it's only through InvestDSM.
Does the city have rental rehab as part of what you do?
Oh.
I would say to some extent with the federal funds, so home dollars, sometimes
dollars.
special CDBG allocations will go into rehab. usually of larger multifamily properties. For our program, we're focusing on 10 units or less. So the smaller multifamily that you find in, kind of scattered throughout our neighborhoods, trying to enable them to do larger capital upgrades that, might be cost prohibitive because of the rents they can charge. We tie that then to a cap on what they can raise the rent through the forgiveness period on the grant. So trying to use our grant funds to leverage preserving some affordable rent rates in the neighborhood.
And then we've had quite a few large multifamily rehabs that have occurred that use TIF and things of that nature as well.
So when you stack kind of all of the 2022 grant accomplishments together, we managed to, actually it's closer to 700 projects when you add all the special things in, completed 272 projects, right around $14 million worth of total investment across the special investment districts. Invest DSM was about 3.1 million of that. We leveraged the other 10.8. And then we're still finalizing numbers on some of the larger projects that finished out recently. Just kind of how that breaks down in terms of percentages. So 95% of the projects we completed last year were with existing homeowners. And then about 68% of the dollars that we spent went to those existing homeowners. The other 32% of those dollars went to, commercial property owners, developers, some of the larger scale projects. I imagine these numbers will fluctuate a bit year to year. Commercial projects tend to have a longer timeline, and so when they complete and hit is going to vary from year to year, but the vast majority of our projects are always going to be with existing homeowners in these neighborhoods. And I think we've got a really healthy balance this past year, healthy mix of things across the different property types. So then kind of rolling it all together over the past 3 years, it's been about 800 projects that we've completed and over $22.5 million worth of investment that we've prompted in these 4 special investment districts. So we're feeling really good about that. Again, it's about 1 to 3 in terms of the dollars that Invest DSM is putting in versus the private or other sources of funds that it's leveraging. So moving away from grant programs, just quickly on those development activities that I was mentioning, we're doing quite a bit on this side of the world as well. To date, over the past 3 years, we've acquired about 57 different properties. Some of those are parcels that we have split from other parcels. And so we've taken one, split it into 2 to enable another housing unit to be put in. We've now sold 14 of those properties. 5 of those were rehabs, and then 9 of them were lots that will be eventual new constructions. And so by the end of last year, we had brought back about $1.4 million in sale proceeds that then gets recycled into additional development activities. In the 5 rehabs that were sold, the average change in market value was about 128%. Typically when we're buying something to rehab it, it's a full gut situation. So we're taking something that's in pretty poor condition or that needs major layout changes or that does not have a garage, and we're adding some of those things to it. So just a couple of examples. This was Columbus Park rehab that we did. It's one of the ones that sold for about $230,000. This was before, and then after has a little bit more curb appeal. We opened up the layout on the interior so that the kitchen and living room actually feel like one space, and then we added a new garage in the back. We also tend to update all the mechanical systems when we do these rehabs, and so they're getting more energy efficient furnaces and making sure we've got insulation where there should be insulation and all of those things. Do you have a question?
If we were interested in expanding the rehab program, what kind of capacity would we have to sort of intercept those homes that are on the brink of falling into complete disrepair or nuisance property?
Yeah, so if the city was wanting to do that?
If in collaboration we were wanting to expand that.
Sure.
So we're going to get into that with ION a little more, right?
That's true, yeah.
That's the intent.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I mean, there's half of me that says the sky's the limit in terms of what we can do, and then there's the realist there's the reality of contractor capacity in our community is an issue. And so I think that's something that is just, a reality we all need to be aware of. Yeah. I think this was about 1,100 square feet. Yeah. This one was an Oak Park home. This one I think is around 900 square feet. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We opened up the front porch, and this was more of a cosmetic refresh, but we also updated systems and, did all of that kind of code work as well. And this one, I'm trying to think, this one sold around 189. Yeah.
We're having conversations about all electric. I know air source heat pumps are around and are getting used for both air conditioning and heating. Mm-hmm. Have you guys explored air source heat pumps? And what's been your experience, if you have?
I don't know that we've specifically explored air source heat pumps yet. Our focus so far, at least, has been a little bit more around how do we make sure the R value in the home is kind of appropriate when we leave in terms of insulation in the attic walls. If the furnace is older than a certain number of years or less efficient than, I forget what exactly our standard is, but 80%, then we're upgrading in all of those cases. I think it's a conversation that we're open to. I know that my staff, I've got a couple on staff that feel very passionately about how can we move the needle on energy efficiency. And so it's kind of a case-by-case decision on what does the home require, what can be handled within the budget. And so if there's specific things you're interested in having us explore, we're happy.
I'd be particularly interested in the air source heat pump piece of that. And I know particularly, there are more rebates available. Right. And I don't know, some of that might have to go to the eventual buyer rather than the rehabber.
Right.
So that may be a challenge to work out. But I would be particularly interested in understanding that in the rehab setting. I know it's pretty easy to integrate them into a new construction, but getting some examples of the rehab, I'd be curious to hear how that works.
Okay, I'll make a note. Thank you.
Do you have a cap on the increase in value that you are trying to create in these rehabs and new constructions from like the surrounding home prices?
No, not an explicit cap. There's always only so far that we're going to be able to push the market.
Okay.
And I think we had an example of that with a new construction that was listed too high for the market in Oak Park, and then eventually came down and sold at a price point that was a little bit more appropriate for the neighborhood. We are, I would say, always overspending, always over improving when we're doing kind of the full gut rehab, partly because we're using a few projects to try and prompt value appreciation for the many, right? We have not yet put in caps on what those increases could be.
Okay.
This one's in Drake. Again, it was kind of a full-scale renovation, new home buyer there. This one is larger, more like 1,600 square feet. Yeah, this one's quite a transformation. We have the homes on either side as well, and so working through those. This was not a conversion. It was already a single family, but it had a very funky layout. The only full bath in the house was on the first floor. All the bedrooms were upstairs. Had a weird little half bath in like a laundry hallway situation. And so we stole the fourth bedroom and used that to create 2 full bathrooms upstairs so that there's more of a primary suite. And then left a powder room laundry area downstairs with a reconfigured kitchen. So a lot of layout changes in this one. It turned out well. It sold very quickly. And we're continuing to try and experiment with some of these.
Something that I'm noticing, first thing I'm noticing is that y'all really like blue. All these houses have turned blue. Which,
Yeah, well, yeah.
oh, yeah, of course. But something else that I'm noticing is on the previous picture for this house, there was like a specific window detail that I think is kind of unique to the style and the area and things like that when the houses were built. And that didn't really get preserved in the update. And I'm wondering how much y'all like work with preservation of those character details and like the historic nature of the homes in the area.
Yeah. Where we can, we're really trying to preserve the historic character. This particular one, we ended up we had a contractor issue.
Great.
And it was a mistake.
Great.
That window did not get preserved.
Well, that's going to happen.
So that was frustrating. But we are trying to do that wherever we can. The rest of the windows were kind of a mishmash. And, various had been replaced throughout the years. There wasn't anything common about them. And there were several that were broken or leaking. So we did end up replacing most of the windows throughout the home here. There was another one on the side next to the front door that you can't see in these photos, I think, that had the leaded glass. And I think that one ended up staying.
That's nice.
But the attic ones, fortunately, didn't. So.
Yes, I noticed
yes.
the pillars are gorgeous.
So aiming to rebuild the porches where we can. We do have an architect that we work with, Sequel Architecture. Steve Wilkie-Shapiro's on the Urban Design Review Board and is a historic preservationist. And so he's a great resource for us in kind of parsing out, what's possible to preserve and what things absolutely are going to have to be replaced.
I just think I'm glad that you guys have a policy on this, or at least a practice on this.
Yep.
So I think it's important, not a lot of homeowners necessarily can afford the type of historic renovations if they're doing renovations to their home, but having an opportunity to come in and be able to do so much work and then actually be able to afford to preserve it, I think is good where we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate that.
That is definitely the goal.
I don't know.
City property.
It does, doesn't it? It may be on the list to go. This picture was taken last winter. It may actually be gone by now. There were a couple of trees that were dying on this property that we ended up having to take out.
I don't know, you might have a picture of the house that we took over from Drake and moved to the corner of 31st.
I don't have that picture in
But
here.
just the historical significance, moved a whole house over to preserve it of the history. So it's on 31st and Cottage Grove. So
yeah, we have several more coming. One that's listed right now that's on 26th Street in Drake that had a lot more of the historic elements that were able to be saved. And then a couple on the 31st and Cottage Grove corner where similar.
I've been watching the progress of that one. I go by that one a lot. Is that is there a plan to kind of restore? Because when it was bare bones, so there's not a lot to preserve of what was actually there. But is the plan to kind of get it back to what it was, type of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's coming along. Those should be done in the spring. And there's some interior features that we found that were very cool. Some pocket doors that they didn't even know were there. The stair railing on the main stair was able to be saved. So we'll do an open house when those are done and come see it. Wrapping up, just a few other partnerships that we had this past year. Trees Forever. We did another 300 trees with them this past year, bringing our total up to around 900. We did another Dogtown Lights event. This is funded through a grant with Wells Fargo. The lights are still up through the end of February. Those are in Dogtown. And then we've had just a variety of other projects and partnerships that we're working on that are still in process. So those were the two that I wanted to mention today. A little bit about updates for the organization and just looking ahead across this next year. Our board approved so we've now moved from a fiscal year to a calendar year. So our fiscal year starts January 1. It just aligns a little bit better with the way our programs operate. For 2023, we've got about a $16.8 million budget. So that includes the funding allocation from the city and county. And then we've got a few additional sources, including sale proceeds that are coming back from our development activities. We've got a loan that we're using right now from the Des Moines Redevelopment Company. We have Central Bank that is working on putting together $1 million fund for our development activities and some other things. So starting to kind of build that revenue beyond just the public dollars. We are just starting a strategic planning process, looking at the next phase of the organization now that we've got our legs under us. And particularly thinking about how do we ensure that InvestDSM has the resources it needs to accommodate expanding our geography of the areas that we serve. And then working in conjunction with city staff to identify additional neighborhoods that might be appropriate for InvestDSM to take on over the next couple of years.
In that strategic planning process, are you planning to engage the stakeholders like city and the council potentially in discussions on that?
Yes, I think that for the moment, we've started with board, staff, and then neighborhood stakeholders.
As you should.
Yes. And yes, I think there could be an opportunity for other city and county stakeholders to comment on that. We did in the fall have our consulting team from CZB who helped us put this whole thing together. They came back for a couple of days just to take a look at the progress that we've made over the last few years. I sent that memo around last week and just pulled out a couple of highlights. I won't spend a lot of time on these, but the things they highlighted, they felt we were doing really well. It's resident leadership and stakeholder engagement. All the work that we're doing is really predicated on the assumption that neighbors are going to invest in the community where they live. And so, trying to facilitate various ways that residents and business owners can plug into all that we're doing. Managing the organization, not growing our staff too fast, but also trying to keep up with the volume of projects that are coming at us. And so, thinking through that and kind of adding to those staff resources as we need them. And then trying to stay faithful to our mission at the board and staff level as, we get a variety of things thrown at us. And so those were some of the compliments. Still a little too early to start to measure things like value growth and some of the, very specific data-driven outcomes that we have in each of the neighborhood plans. There's a lag between when we do the projects and when you see the results in things like assessed values. But, given the outputs, the numbers and the level of investment that we are putting into these communities, all signs are pointing to the fact that we are on track to eventually meet those outcomes. And then just things for us to think about, especially as we kind of transition into this next phase of growth, is we are doing a significant volume of projects, and we have 6 staff that are managing all of these things. And so staying proactive in the face of that can sometimes be difficult when you're just trying to make sure that you're keeping up with what's coming in the door. So thinking about, how do we thoughtfully grow the resources that we have in order to make sure that we can adequately serve any additional geographies that would come on. So those are questions that our board and staff will be kind of dealing with as we go through this strategic planning process. And then I'm sure people are curious, I know everybody's curious about when will we be serving new neighborhoods? I think this is kind of the anticipated timeline, still a bit in flux, but I know the city has the data analysis underway. We're expecting that to be complete in the spring. And then we'll start to take those analysis results from the data and figure out preliminary recommendations around what neighborhood areas might be good candidates for our programs. We want to make sure that we're also thinking about the capacity of those neighborhood areas and the level of interest on the part of residents to participate and have these programs available. So I imagine there will be some sort of relationship with the neighborhoods that are identified as far as figuring that piece out. And then our board will be looking at putting a set of recommendations together to come back to you, I imagine probably late summer, with the planning process starting after that and taking about 9 months. So it looks like it'll probably be, mid to late 2024 when those new areas come to InvestDSM for implementation. Gives us a little time to figure out the resource piece before then. Probably not looking at another set of 4 neighborhoods. I think that's too much for the capacity that we have. We may look to identify 3 or 4, start with 1 or 2, and then kind of stagger so that planning could start with the other 1 or 2 in a couple of years. So that way we don't have to go through the whole data process again in 3 years. But we're also looking at where it might be appropriate to expand boundaries of our existing special investment districts, where we already have leadership and momentum in place, and how do we start to kind of spread that across another couple of blocks. So,
And Amber, you're still looking at the CZB report that identified the middle neighborhoods?
So all of that data work is being redone right now. So yes, I think the starting point is the analysis that happened in 2017. All of those data points, so property conditions, assessed values, sale prices, demographics, it's all being updated right now. And that new analysis will help re-identify where the middle is now in 2023 and which middle neighborhoods might be good candidates for us. That's all I have for you today. I've overstayed my welcome. What other questions do you have for me?
Not a question, Amber, but I think we should, Polk County deserves a tip of the hat for their partnership in this. I know just quickly when Springfield, Missouri was here to look at the program, and as I recall, you said something about, well, this is a partnership between Des Moines and Polk County, and there was a pause. Oh, we don't do anything with the county. So this is another great example of how Des Moines and Polk County work together on projects. So, I mean, this would not be happening to certainly at this breadth without Polk County being involved. So,
yeah. Thanks, Carl. I think that's an important note to make. They've been really good partners in this whole initiative.
Sorry. We increased our investment or our contribution into InvestDSM recently, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We just re-upped that. Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I just think it's really important to bring up that the private people that are coming on board now and how they've seen the value of what's being done with InvestDSM. So we're getting to much faster to get other people wanting to invest in the city and the neighborhoods. Like this one bank is in the Highland Park neighborhood, and so I think they specifically want to be in certain neighborhoods too. So I think the more we can do that, it leverages the dollars that we put in and gets to where we can possibly do things faster and get more done. So I appreciate the work Amber and her staff has done to bring that on too.
Is there a process? I mean, this is probably down the line because we're not even at the point where you're saying we're not even at the point where we can assess the value increases, which when we do get to that point, I hope that we can have a discussion on how to utilize that additional tax revenue. It was my understanding that the idea is that if you invest in the middling neighborhoods, you have additional tax revenue to then invest in those, that kind of third tier. And so I'm hoping that can be the direction that we look for that. But if you want to comment on that first,
Yeah, just understand that the taxes are not captured within these 4 areas. It's available to the general fund
Yes.
and entire budget.
But if we can at least evaluate how much that we've, increased that, then we can decide what to do with that.
That's it.
Is there a process, or is there been thought about, as these neighborhoods get to a certain point, or even have we figured out what that point is, a process for leaving an area?
Yeah, good question. So at the beginning, we kind of identified that there's probably about a 10-year implementation timeframe for each of these. Franklin might be moving a little bit faster than that. I think we'll be able, we will start looking at assessments as the new ones come out here this spring. It's more likely it'll be 2025 before we really start to see that. And then we want to make sure that that is not just a one-off, but that is kind of sustainable change. But yes, so in each one of the neighborhood plans, there are very specific kind of measurable outcomes, and that's what we'll eventually be using to figure out, are we done? Are we ready to exit? That's probably a few years away for us still. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you all. Yes, tomorrow.
Thank you, Amber. I think we'll keep this conversation rolling unless the council needs a 5-minute break. I'm looking for that guidance, Mayor.
Let's keep it going.
Okay, we'll keep it going, and we'll keep in the area of neighborhoods and revitalization. This is our diving, you've all heard about our ION program, so this is an opportunity to present this to the public and essentially talk about opportunities that are now citywide with this program.
Morning, Mayor, City Council, Chris Johansson, Neighborhood Services Director. Here to give you an update on ION, specifically to talk about the program, the specifics with the work that the program will do, kind of the finances behind it, and kind of our plans to roll the program out. One thing, just talk about the goal of the program. I think it's a perfect segue with Amber's presentation. Goals are a little bit different, so I just want you to make sure you keep that in mind. But the main thing of the program is citywide. We focus on the exterior repairs of the program, affect the health and safety of the property. I think one way to think about this is we're really focused on preventing the homes from sliding into a public nuisance status. The main goal is not necessarily to prove the market value of the property, but by the nature of the work that we are doing, you could see that as a benefit, and also a benefit to the surrounding properties. Additionally, this is expanded as a safety net for low-income property owners and persons with disabilities. So the program, as we've talked about, last year we've been in front of you a couple times just talking about this program moving forward. Since last year, staff has conducted over 200 interviews, outreach conversations and meetings, done independent research, looking at programs in other cities, and reviewed the existing city policies and owner-occupied repair programming that we've had in the city as well. And this is just a sample of some of the discussions we've had out in the community. As you can see, we've touched a lot of existing partners that do similar programs, but also reached out to other stakeholders in the community to see how we should shape this program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dan to kind of lead you through the specifics of the program.
Dan Grauerholtz with the Property Improvement Program Supervisor. Our mission statement is to help property owners with exterior repairs in a team effort that makes neighborhoods healthier and more connected. Obviously, the ideal outcome is to fix the property. Then tangent to that is empower the owner by building pride in their property that they live in, give them something that they can hold value in. Strengthen the neighborhood through building relationships with neighbors and our partners. This is a voluntary program. ION believes that assistance plus empowerment is greater than enforcement. Services offered, it's the exterior envelope of the property. We look at the roof, gutters, fascia, soffit, siding repairs, exterior foundation repairs, as you can see from the exterior of the property. We won't go in and correct a major basement deficiency. Windows, doors, work to the lot as it affects the livability of the structure, say water drainage or anything of that nature, and then driveway safety repairs if it's a tripping hazard or some sort of a safety issue where the owner has had problems with that. This is a breakdown of some of our partners, where they land on the AMI. This particular chart's based off of a family of 3. You can see Rebuilding Together, Polk County, they kind of land at that, and NFC lands at a 50% AMI. Polk also has a bracket that goes off of federal poverty level, so that's up a little bit, around 55%. Habitat's in there at 60. They did just expand to 80% for veterans, which is pretty exciting. And then we're at 80% to follow existing city programs. We have the ION workflow here. We start out with an application season of October 1st to March 31st, construction from April 1st to September 30th. Now, obviously, weather can change those dates a little bit. If we have a good winter, we can go a little longer. If it sets in sooner, we have to shut her down. First, we identify a property, whether it's voluntary or a referral, or sometimes NID will bring us something that they would like us to take a look at. So a lot of times the referrals come from interdepartment. We assess the situation. We assess the property through the application. We look at the qualifications to see what our residents can qualify for, whether it's direct help or we refer them to a partnership or whatever fits their needs the most, what services they need. We develop the plan as far as going out, doing a scope of work, working with the owner to identify what their needs are, and that flows into our workflow of partnership, where we can take it to, say, Habitat for Humanity or NFC. Many times we've worked together in a hybrid situation, which has really worked out well for both parties as your dollar bill's going farther. Then we have our direct projects where we do it ourselves. Once the project's completed, we close that out. Our OCs act as the project manager, and once the customer is satisfied with the repairs, we close out the project. The financial assistance, we offer financial assistance to 80% and below. Small projects are up to $3,500. Those are grants. Our medium projects would be $3,500 to $20,000. Then anything above $20,000 is considered a large project. The forgivability of that is over a 60-month period. It's a forgivable lien. For families below 50% AMI, we realize that they need a little more help. We will go, the first $20,000 is forgiven through a forgivable grant. Anything above $20,000 is a 50-50 split. For example, a $25,000 repair, $22,500 of that is forgiven at a rate of $375 a month, and the $2,500 goes to the back end on a deferred loan or a lien. With 51 to 80%, it's just a 50-50 split. So $10,000 repair would be $5,000 forgivable. Our next steps, we roll out the program through social media, the news release, and just general media. We activate the website with program information and application. I believe that is live now. And we've created some door hangers, brochures, one-sheets that we'll distribute through some targeted areas, as well as just staff meetings and neighborhood meetings. Any questions? Went through that fairly quick.
I'm glad we got the opportunity a week or so back to ask a lot of questions about this, and I'm glad to see this moving forward. I'm really excited about the financial assistance formula that you guys have figured out for the below 50 and above 50 and between 50 and 80% AMI. I think that's really great. I'm wondering, because as we roll this out, we're gonna have to take some time to be able to evaluate what effect that we're going to have on the neighborhoods and everything like that. But I'm wondering how much data we have from other cities who have done similar types of things like this to sort of see what the effects have been on neighborhoods, or if this is sort of like a new innovation that nobody's really doing it this way?
Through our research, we've found that there's some nonprofits that do similar things as this, but there hasn't been a municipality that we found at the time of research that has done something as voluntary and with as much assistance as what we're doing.
So we have the
There's
opportunity to create a
communities
model.
that have codes, property maintenance codes, but it's largely enforced on a complaint basis, if at all. It's just in case of need type of a thing. But from what we found, there wasn't another one, especially in Iowa at least, that is doing this type of thing.
That's great. I think that it'll be important for us to sort of evaluate, what effects that we end up having and after the first few years of this, and I'm excited to see what the results of that are.
Yeah. And I think Chris could probably speak to the CDBG funds that are common in other communities. I think one of the biggest unique pieces is that we're putting city funding into this and being very intentional about it.
Yeah, it's historically the city has had an owner-occupied rehab program, and we were only ever able to put about $400,000 into it, and that usually only focused on sewer repairs, handicap accessibility, roof repairs. It was really the urgent need in our community. So being able to put general fund, local option sales tax money in it is a big game changer, and I think that's the unique thing that a lot of cities aren't doing and probably have more difficult for them to do too.
Connie?
How much? I can't remember. What was it? $1 million? How much? How much
Total
are we
budget.
putting in from the general fund?
So actually, the sales tax was $1 million a year, and the ARPA funds inserted $3 million.
That's a one-time.
The ARPA.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and all the programs with Invest DSM and what you guys are doing with ION, thank you. We're helping a lot of people in a lot of neighborhoods improve their quality of life, and in many cases, making homes safer.
Chris, I'm interested, or Dan, so are you doing the door hangers on homes that you've identified that need a little TLC, or?
Citywide.
Citywide, so, but, I mean, you're not canvassing the whole neighborhood, only the homes that
are in need.
In need, okay. And so you do a door hanger and you wouldn't know what the first language of that household is. Is there a way, like in the English version of the door hanger, you could, I don't know, you've probably already designed this, and I'm just trying to think like, okay, that's not my first language. How would I know who to contact to get it in?
A QR code, that's something that's being used.
It'd be better just to hang it in the right language the first time.
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't know.
Well,
So, I mean, this is an interesting challenge. I'm not suggesting any particular path, but just how you would get hold of either the occupant or the homeowner.
Right. We've looked into that, and like by doing the door knockers, you don't know.
Right.
So, and it's hard to, you can assume Spanish, but it's hard to.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So many different languages.
Yeah.
But I am proud to say that on my staff, I have 2 bilingual employees that are working really hard at keeping our stuff at least in Spanish and English. We do have the language line, which helps also, that we can, that offers, dozens, if not hundreds, different languages through that. So that's very helpful as well. But we do have Spanish versions of our documents.
Right.
But
and so somehow, if they get an English door hanger, they would know who to contact to get it in a language they're comfortable with.
Yep. Al?
Al Setka, Chief Communications Officer for the City of Des Moines. The website is now activated for ION, dsm.city/ION, and as with all our pages, it's translated into about 150 languages.
Yeah, there's a...
So all that
pull down
information
from the
that's on
top,
that
yeah.
website, that webpage for
okay.
ION, will be translated in any of the languages. So.
And referenced on these door knockers.
So there's pretty detailed census data on like at least like block level on likelihood of a language being spoken, like and it can get like relatively specific to like the groups that the like racial and ethnic groups that are living in those areas. I wonder if there's data from the schools that we can
That's
tap
what I was
into.
going to say.
Yeah, I figured.
We could get this information and should present it to the community and schools coordinators who work with families, and they do a lot of outreach, so
Yeah.
they could.
It could go on the they have like that little app or whatever that translates things immediately for you as well, Snap, that they communicate with parents.
I think that it'd be a great way, because whether it be the parent or the grandparent, there would be some connectivity. So again, maybe checking to put it even on the district's website as an opportunity.
And how far along is the design for the door hangers? Maybe
Printed
Al?
yesterday.
I don't know. Sorry?
Printed yesterday.
Printed yesterday? Okay, okay.
The first batch, yeah.
All right, then I won't say any more.
There will be some changes, I'm sure, but the first batch is printed yesterday.
I'd love to get an example one.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, just thrown in the mailbox or something like that.
And I would like to, you brought up the census. We do have an employee that worked the last census, so he knows a lot of where to find that information, real accessible quickly. So that has been looked into as well. So I'm very proud of my team as far as the diversity that we have and the knowledge that's there. So I think we've thought of about everything we can think of, but of course there's always those surprises that pop up. So.
This would, just to point out, this would be a great spot for like an equity mapping initiative that we have talked about at the city, of having that tool for departments to be able to go in and like not have to dig through census data, to be completely honest, because it's a lot, but to be able to go in and really identify right away, it would really help with something like this. And I hope that there's interest on the council for continuing an initiative like that.
Josh?
Yeah, I agree with what Councilmember Shoemaker and Councilmember Bozen had said. I have a question. We identified two different income levels this is targeted at, the 50% AMI, the 80% AMI. Do we have target amounts within the allocation for how much in each of those? Because, it obviously looks very different if all the dollars end up going to the 80% level. We'll do more because there's less of the forgivable loan piece, but in terms of perhaps some of the most vulnerable folks and the ability to stay in their home, like that's an important piece of this, the fact that we're trying to help those folks who have a very real need, and we could successfully, without adding that layer of gold, we could successfully do this without hitting that piece of the population.
Yeah. I understand the concern, and we don't have it split up or earmarked based on income. The one thing I would tell you, I know after and I'm not sure if you're going to like to hear it, but after the first year going through this, I think we're going to have more experience of who's coming in and who's not, with it being voluntary. And I think we might be able to make a better decision at that point. If we are seeing what the worry is, then I think we'll have that information to be able to say, okay, we need to set aside some funding specifically for that population. But with it being voluntary, and I think that's going to be helpful maybe after the first year. That's all right.
I would add to that, the average AMI that we serviced through the soft rollout was well below 80%. It was closer to that 50%. Off the top of my head, I believe it was 46. So, I can't guarantee that's the exact number, but I know it was much closer to 50% than it was 80%.
Yeah, I think it's just important that we monitor that specific metric and be mindful of it, because if we're learning things and there's outreach, I get, but I think that's a particularly important thing when we are talking about who we're trying to help be able to stay in their home.
I agree.
The affordability piece and hitting that low AMI, because that's a unique thing that we
And I think with the outreach, if you're gearing towards the neighborhoods that you know, or the houses in the worst condition.
It's the houses, yeah.
If you go by what the house's worst condition is, you're probably going to stay at the target. More being the lowest because they haven't been able to keep up with their homes or on fixed income or some of those things. So I think a lot of it could just depend on the outreach they're doing too. So appreciate, because you tested how many, or an area, or how many?
Citywide, we did repairs on 23 properties.
Okay.
I would agree that I think it's important that, either that we designate ahead of time and make sure that, a certain percentage is allocated for the lower income bracket, or that we are very closely monitoring that. And if we see a shift where it's like leaning towards the high edge, we really need to do something about that. Because we don't want a program that's like intended to help a certain group, and we only see the benefit for people who aren't necessarily struggling the most, but are struggling still. But we definitely want to make sure that we're focused on that.
And to keep that easy, we've added a lot of layers into EnerGov to where we can pull out demographics to see who's being served, who's overserved, who's underserved.
That's great.
And then we can adjust our approach accordingly.
Are we? How often are we pulling a report on that or something like that?
6 months out, we should be able to provide what we've got,
Great.
Informally, and then we'll have annual reports that are more formalized. I don't want us to lose track of 80% AMI
No, it's still
for home ownership. Those families are struggling.
Yes.
And so it's going to be more towards the house, but we will definitely report out on the 50% as well.
I know we've talked the language thing to death, but I'm just wondering, the language access policy is a new thing that we've implemented in the city, and so I'm kind of wondering how that was used. It's not yet implemented? No. Oh, okay.
Bridging the gap work, and that's still in motion, so that can help this group as well.
Gotcha. The only other question I had was, is there a specific launch date for applications open for the next period? I know that we can still refer, but is there like a launch date of we're going?
We're ready to run.
Great.
We've been receiving some just off of word of mouth. After today, communications will kind of step it up a little bit, and we expect applications to.
Okay, awesome. Exciting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. Keep up the great work. Look forward to updates on your progress, and we're going to take a... Sure, if they want. We do have the chief coming in to give us an update, but why don't we quickly skip to the council board updates. Is everybody all prepared to do that?
Just if there are, at least.
I really don't have anything new other than I started.
Yeah.
I mean, gave ours, Carl's.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
How about Dart?
I can give a couple things. I'll start with Homeless Coordinating Council. We've got the unsheltered study that the Extreme Weather Work Group has been working on in partnership with Drake and others that is finally being rolled out. So there are presentations that actually at our Homeless Coordinating Council meeting later this week that will be presented to that group. I think that'll be we can get folks links or copies to it if they haven't seen it. I think that's worth just taking a look at and can help inform things going forward. I'll go to DART. There's a lot of different pieces going on there. The new CEO search has started. There's an executive search firm that's been hired and is helping work through that process. I think the goal is to have a timeline there to identify and get a new CEO in the next 6 months. We've talked previously about funding diversification. DART is working on that up at the legislature. as I think we've talked to this body, the preferred solution identified by the DART Commission is the local option hotel motel. But the commission has also been clear that they're flexible in terms of the key is solving the funding diversification problem. We did have a budget work session for DART yesterday that looked at the structural deficit that will exist over time and started looking at what options will be out there in terms of addressing that deficit should there not be funding diversification. So that conversation at a very high level is starting to happen. And I can have separate conversations with folks. Probably be good to see some of what that looks like in terms of just the high level pathways that the DART staff have laid out that the commission will have to consider in the coming years if we don't solve it. So those are the things that are going on at DART.
I can provide two quick updates regarding the Blank Park Zoo, working on a strategic plan and a new master plan. I think, let's see, 2026 will be the 60th anniversary of the Blank Park Zoo. And so some of those activities may dovetail with that and a capital campaign. Regarding the Des Moines Arts Festival, they've created a 501c3 that is sort of like a sister or cousin related. So for activities outside of the 3-day arts festival, working on a project that they're branding as Artworks, and it's to develop a resource for artists of all different types, visual artists, musicians, muralists, as one central place to get that information. For example, who does murals in Des Moines? If you're looking for a mural, or musicians, their first creative breakfast group, I think, is meeting this Saturday morning, and 99 people signed up to be a part of it. So those are good things. Kind of expanding the reach of the arts festival beyond being a 3-day event. So thank you.
Go back to Bravo that I'm on because it kind of interconnects because it's the overarching. So working with Bravo to create pathways to do art in different ways, but the Artworks is really to do individual artists. And just that Bravo too, I know that the city has given them money and waiting to see what projects they're going to do that are geared for Des Moines only, and primarily, hopefully, the young people of Des Moines. So just an update, and they have their big gala coming up February 4th, is that Saturday night, which is their largest fundraiser to help cover the expenses of the operations and then promote art.
3 different ones. Metro Waste Authority, we voted on our budget, our last meeting last Wednesday. Everything went fine. There's nothing that jumped out. I'll let Linda talk a little bit about the WRA. I know that we're looking at some changes for legal and things like that. I'm not on that executive committee of that portion. We did, and some of the others participated at the MPO in somewhat of a strategic planning. We're revisiting our strategic plan for the MPO. It was some challenging conversations, I would say, but we're working through that. We've entered into some contracts that are a challenge with our 2080 agreement, and I know that our legal department's looking at that right now and seeing where we're at with some of those things. But it was good conversation, and we're going to keep moving forward. And other than that, yeah, things are water trails. I don't know. There's really no update. They'll be getting started on Scott Street soon enough, and that's about it.
Mayor and I sit on that committee, and it's been pretty quiet. I haven't I haven't heard anything, so I think there might be some things going on.
Scott's the one dealing with most of it.
Okay, maybe
I'd
Scott
say
is.
Jeff.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
that too.
Okay, that's good.
We're
So-
probably 2 or 3 weeks out from being able to bring back something to council. There's been a lot of back and forth with documents. As you might imagine, some language changes. A lot of chefs in the kitchen, so we're trying to figure out how to get that language right.
Yeah. I also sit on the Botanical Garden Board, and great things are happening there. It just seems like every day there is something going on. Their educational classes that they've offered have been full. They have their concert series on Sundays that you can go to, wonderful events. So they're really doing some wonderful things there, and appreciative of the agreement that we approved Monday night to allocate some funds for them. We do own the building, and it is in need of major repairs in the heating and cooling. So hopefully we'll see some improvements that are being able to be made there quickly.
Any other thoughts, anybody? Well, good work on those boards. Most of you, since I sit on some of the boards with you, I think you've given me a pretty good lead in. MPO, I agree with you. We've got a little work to do over there as to where we're going, what we're doing, how we're all working together. And so periodic updates certainly are helpful. Everybody kind of knows where we're going.
Right on cue.
Good morning.
Perfect timing.
Perfect.
We were hovering at the home.
Good.
Boss,
Is that all the updates?
particular order you'd like us to?
I don't think so. It's really up to you.
All right.
I think we're good to go.
I'll kick this off. Morning, everyone. So we have several presentations here. I'm going to give you a brief overview of a couple of them. Sergeant Brian O'Donnell and Major Miller are heading up our 21CP, our CLIA, and also the Public Works LLC progress. Sergeant O'Donnell will talk about CLIA and where we're at in that process. Major Miller will take 21CP and Public Works LLC. Captain Josh Ramey will talk a little bit about our ethos report and where we are moving forward with that, and some of the ideas that the solution team is implementing. And I'm going to give you a very brief overview on two topics. First of all, care and mobile crisis. Sergeant Garcia and Officer O'Neill, who are full-time representatives on those, are both out of town for extensive training in that regard. So I'm here in their stead. And also our 30 by 30 project, which is a national movement that we signed on about 2 years ago to recruit, adjust policies, procedures, facilities to try and reach the goal of 30% of our employee base being female by the year 3030. We'll start with care and mobile crisis. The PowerPoint that I had was a little bit dated. It was something Sergeant Garcia put together as they were looking at expansion. So mobile crisis is a program that we've had for years. It's now become kind of the buzzword across the industry. A lot of agencies are looking into this, trying to implement it. We got a jump start up on that. We started ours in 2001. Then Chief McCarthy, something that was near and dear to his heart. He also recognized an uptick in calls to suicidal subjects during that period for whatever reason. So we contracted with Irely Ball at the time and brought clinicians into our building, provided office space, assigned a full-time officer, Officer Kelly Drain at the time, to that unit, gave them police radios, access to our records, so we could respond to those mental health crisis calls collectively. That went on for a period of about 15 years, and then we started taking a deep dive into the data. and realized we need to expand that and take it to a new level. So we had a group of employees from Polk County Public Health, Polk County Board of Supervisors, our employees, mental health clinicians. They took a road trip to Austin, Texas, who has kind of the premier model in crisis response. They came back with a list of ideas. We formed a committee, sat down, looked at it collectively from the city, the county, the police department, and the care providers in the area, looked at the data, came up with some recommendations, and City Manager Scott Sanders was able to use some of the local option sales tax money to funnel in our direction to promote this expansion. So mobile crisis went from 1 police officer and 2 clinicians that had rotating shifts when it first was started to now Police Sergeant Lorna Garcia, Police Officer Sean O'Neill, who have received extensive training in crisis response. The group has now been expanded to 8 clinicians. So we have full-time coverage across the city, and these clinicians are able to divert those calls for services away from police officers in a lot of instances to just the experts in the field. We've watched the calls for services in the second half of 2022. They were responding to somewhere between 600 and 800 calls a month. So getting experts to do expert work in the field, bringing up the police officers to do what police officers need to do. We are not out of the mobile crisis business completely. There are still those calls that have weapons involved or someone with a history of violence where we respond with the clinicians in that support role. As we walked through that and we looked at the data, the nature of the calls, we decided that the next step in this process is let's see if we can intervene those calls right at the point of contact. So we were able, with the support of Manager Sanders, to get an additional clinician who is housed in our communication center. So those calls come in, that call can be diverted right to the clinician in the dispatch center, and they can triage that call at the point of contact. Most of the folks that we deal with in our city already have a primary care provider. That clinician can divert it there or get whatever resources need to respond at that time. So the efficiencies on behalf of the police department are incredible, freeing up our folks to do what they should be doing. The care and service that people in crisis receive has grown exponentially. Back to the old adage, let experts do expert work. We provide that support role. We've also made an adjustment in there as well to have clinicians that are cross-trained in both adult and adolescent. I wasn't aware there are 2 different levels of care that are provided, and there's different training and techniques that go with that, but we got that implemented as well. That also has been very successful. It also allows those clinicians to provide that support role to our Des Moines public school system, supplement the resources that they have on site at their buildings. So that's kind of a fast and furious on mobile crisis. We'll continue to watch the data. This entire unit, if you'd like to get an inside look at it, meet the folks. I know City Source did a big article on them, but they're housed in our building. So they have our vehicles, our access to information, our police radios, all the resources of the police department at their disposal. We can dispatch them directly, but they're housed in our building on the lower level. If anybody would like to come in, meet them, talk to them, get to know them and about who they are and what they do, we'd be happy to host you.
I have some questions. You talked about clinicians answering the calls instead of police officers. You said freeing up officers to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. So how often is it that, or can you describe the process a little bit? Is it just the clinician goes out by themselves not with those exceptional cases?
Yes. So the clinicians and the care team. So let's say we have a crisis call come into our communication center. We have a clinician in the communication center, so we divert the call for them. They'll triage it right there. It might be somebody they know. It might be somebody they dealt with in the past. There's no indication of violence, weapons, anything like that. The care team can respond on their own. We don't need a police officer to go. That's kind of the benefit of that clinician in the communication center. Now, on the flip side, they might know, okay, the last time we were out there, there was violence or there was a knife or something like that. Okay, we're going to send our clinicians, and we're also going to send our police officer. So
you send one officer?
What's that?
You send one officer with the clinician?
Yeah, it could be one or two depending on the circumstances. We prioritize all our trips based on the nature of the trip and what's involved. It could be 2 police officers, but they're going to be in that support role for the clinician.
So how do you determine like what a weapon is? Because if somebody's calling in suicidal, they might have a weapon to hurt themselves with. Is that considered a weapon that police would need to respond to?
Yes, it would be.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit? Just because not having the expertise in responding to dangerous calls and things like that, but knowing a little bit about the mental health side, like there's a difference between the there's always the question asked, like if you're with a provider, right? It's like, are you gonna hurt yourself or someone else? And those are 2 separate things. And is there a way to determine sort of like, is that person dangerous with a weapon to hurt someone else or just themselves?
Yeah, so the weapon calls, and that's part of that triage at the beginning of that call. So one of the benefits of having them housed in our building is all the records on those calls are captured in our CAD system. So that clinician could be talking through it, are you inclined to hurt yourself or someone else? And they might say, well, not really. And that clinician can look at the CAD records and they can say, well, last week we were out there, and they were gonna, they're talking about committing suicide with a gun, so we're not going to send a clinician by themselves there. We'll send a police officer or maybe 2 as that support role. Clinician does their work. The police officers are there to make sure the clinician is safe.
So are the police officers there with the clinician at the door, or are they sort of like off to the side, or how does that kind of process? They
would be with the clinician at the door until everybody's comfortable that it's safe.
Okay.
And then the officers they can back away. In most cases, they just leave and go about their business. Once a clinician is safe and they have it under control, they can make that professional decision that, yep, I got this, and we leave and they do their work.
Okay. There was part of the reason I'm asking all these questions, obviously, like it's important to know these things, but there was an incident that was brought to my attention with like four police officers with a clinician, and I don't know any of the details about like if there was a weapon involved or anything like that, but it was just that this person expressed like feeling extremely unsafe and not feeling like they really got the benefit of having a clinician come to them when they were in a time of crisis, and I'm kind of wondering how we balance that need of someone feeling overwhelmed by seeing a bunch of police officers at the door, or one or 2 even, with needing crisis help and wanting to feel safe and comfortable.
Yeah, I don't know the scenario you're talking about either, but I can about guarantee you if there were 4 police officers there was probably a weapon and it was probably a firearm.
Okay.
Because we wouldn't send that level of resource to the garden variety call. It just wouldn't happen.
Okay. So it's really only when it's a very dangerous situation that you're going to respond that way.
Yep, when there's a safety consideration, a lot of times the clinicians can make that decision themselves. Sometimes it's based on, records of trips to that address. But if a clinician has a feeling of safety and they don't need the officers, they can send the officers on their way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for expansion of this whole program, because I think it was critically important. The one question I have is, do you think you need more officers trained like Lorna Garcia and Sean O'Neill? Would that be helpful to have a bigger staff trained in that, since they're taking so many more calls?
I think
just so it's covered like 24/7 for an officer too.
Yeah, so every officer in our building has been through 40 hours of crisis intervention training, so they have received training in this area. As we look forward to expansion,
the priority for me would be expansion on the side of the clinicians, because we're always going to have officers on the street that can support them to do that. I would like to, my preference would be to make sure we always have clinicians on the street, to do that expert work. But all of our officers, in fact, the academy that's going on right now, they will also get 40 hours of it. That will be put on by Sergeant Garcia and the clinicians. So they're not there to make a diagnosis. They're just there to make a preliminary assessment, and get the right services to the right people. So I understand what you're saying, but if Manager Sanders said you can hire 10 more towards this program today, I'd be leaning heavy on the clinicians.
Right. I was just curious and if they get 40 hours, or there's some that you could give even more if they so chose to get more. Is that open to officers?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And actually, there will be a point in time, Sergeant Garcia and Officer O'Neill are fairly high respected, highly capable employees, and the time is going to come when they're going to promote out of their positions. It's just going to happen. I think everybody in this room probably agrees with that. And I had that conversation with Lorna a couple weeks ago, and she said she has multiple folks within our agency that are very interested in filling those spots. So it's a high interest thing. It's not traditional police work, if you will, but I think the folks in our building recognize that it's something that's very important. It's very important to the community, and it's an issue that's not going away.
Josh?
Yeah, so one of the things you said with Councilmember Bozen was if you had resources, the number of additional clinicians. Do you have a sense of, they're responding to 600 to 800 calls a month already. Do you have a sense of the number of additional calls where this type of service would be appropriate? And, if there was, if today, you identified all the calls that the clinicians would be appropriate to respond to, what would that look like? How many more clinicians would we need for that?
Yeah, and that's when the expansion took place. It took place over the summer and the early fall. And at first, now our partner is no longer our early fall, it's Broadlawns, which is experts in the field. They've really stepped up their game, both in terms of expertise and facilities at their campus. It's actually pretty incredible. So right now, that same group, Broadlawn, Steve Johnson, Lorna, Annie Utes from Polk County, and that crew, they're analyzing this data to see, okay, when does the next expansion need to occur? And that date's coming. So they're gonna analyze those calls for service, nature of call, time on call, and just make sure that we have enough resources to cover what we want to cover, how we want to cover it with those experts. So I would say, we generally have an uptick, around the holidays. That's just the way it is. It's always been that way. I would say by spring, we're gonna have a good handle on, do we have enough resources? If we expand, what does it need to look like, and at what level? We'll probably be having that conversation, as a city and with Broadlawns, but they've been an incredible partner.
Chief, two questions. So when you count 8 clinicians, does that include one who's rotating in the dispatch room?
That was an additional employee that Manager Sanders was able to authorize using the lost money.
So is it 8 or 9 then? Because they rotate in and out of the.
Yeah, so it'd be 8 in the field and one in the communications center.
9. I guess I'm not.
9 total.
9 total. Gotcha.
But 1 in the communications center. And right now, the communications center piece is not 24/7 because we're going to wait and see what the data says. It may turn out to be that way at some point.
Okay.
But we were able to go back the last 5 years and look at nature of call, time of day, day of week, and take the bulk of those calls and assign that clinician to that schedule.
Okay.
So it's they rotate through from field work to a stint in the communication center, so they get a perspective from both sides.
Right. Okay. So I'm glad the youth mental health crisis response is being taken, that's part of the solution. But regarding, I know that there's been issue with youth mental health beds. I know that's not on your ledger, but do you have an idea where that discussion is going?
I do not. That has historically been a problem. If you look at, so Polk County, they are charged actually by code to provide mental health services and transport services, for people, that need more extensive treatment, maybe in a facility. And they have full-time staff of 3 cars, 3 units staffed by 2 people that transport even adults all over the state every single day. That's all they do. So the number of beds is certainly an issue. It's been an issue for the 31 years I've been there. That's probably not something I can fix at my level. My intent is on that initial response, let's make sure we get experts on the scene to provide that preliminary assessment and that primary care.
For now, no youth beds yet. Okay.
No, not that I'm aware of. That's going to be an issue moving forward, because this is something that we need to get our arms around, not just as a community. I mean, this, it doesn't stop at the jurisdictional lines of Des Moines. I mean, this is across the metro. It's also across the state. We're fortunate here to have experts that we can rely on and partner with. I shudder to think what's happening in rural Iowa, where services are certainly lacking. So we have an advantage, and we take advantage of that through our partnerships and the experts we have here in town.
Have we been making an effort to advertise or communicate with the public about like other crisis lines that exist in like statewide, like or national crisis lines? I know that we have a really good resource with Iowa Crisis Chat coming out of Iowa City, which is available to anyone in the state, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know how much we've been communicating about that.
My understanding is the Amos Group and others with the mental health professionals have been tackling that side of it.
Okay.
Yeah, Polk County Health is deep into that as well.
Okay.
Annie Utes and her team are big on that. Lauren and I went up and talked to then Attorney General Tom Miller a few months ago and ran through this program with him. And I know his office has done some advertising, for other parts of the state that need these services that don't necessarily have access to what we have here.
And you said we based this off a model in Austin. Was that a police housed mobile crisis model as well?
Yes, it was. It's a combination of what we developed here: police, mental health professionals, and the communication center piece. That's where we picked that up from. Okay. They actually visited the communication center, visited with that clinician, and watched her triage those calls right at the point of contact and get the right services there. Many times it doesn't involve a police officer, so that was kind of a big deal to us to watch that play out.
I wonder if we are able to sort of, as we're looking at expansion, if we're able to take references from other mobile crisis and crisis line sort of models. And I mentioned Iowa City because I'm relatively familiar with their program there, which is run out of a nonprofit, but has mobile crisis and a crisis line and has like a whole lot of staff on the crisis line, so that obviously if people are calling 911, it's at the point of emergency, but developing so that we kind of have some in between for people to, more staffing on that point, even with the calling in and being able to potentially deflate a situation to the point where it's no longer a crisis.
Yeah, so our communication center will get a wide variety of calls. I mean, people know if they call 911, first of all, somebody's going to answer. And secondly, somebody's going to respond. Doesn't matter if it's a crisis issue or, your your sink's leaking, and you don't know who to call. So having that clinician in dispatch, they can make those referrals to those other services as well. They can connect them with a crisis line, because we might get a call from somebody that's in Warren County. And, we have a small section of Warren County that we respond to, but they have a crisis line that covers Warren County. They say, okay, well, let me connect you to this crisis line. They can make that connection and get them pointed in the right direction with the services in their area. So that's kind of the big benefit of having that clinician there. They're aware of all the services, and they can point people in the right direction.
When we're connecting people with those resources, are we like forwarding them directly? Like if they're on the phone, like we're able to forward them directly to that number, or is it kind of like, here's a number, go call?
No, we can forward them directly to that number, and we can stay on the line with them until that connection is made.
Okay.
We have to, for our own benefit, we always close that loop. We're not just going to say, well, here's a number you can call and then hang up, because in my opinion, we're technically responsible to make sure they get the services they need. So we close that loop.
I agree. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, and sometimes also with the mental health clinicians and others that you have that are working with you, plus the training of your staff, you've been able to diffuse some situations and in others get those people to mental health support, whether it's Unity Point or Broadlawns or wherever, and get them checked in till they can get in a little calmer state of mind. And I've heard and watched your people work through that, and quite frankly, I think save a lot of lives.
Yeah, one of the big benefits living in Des Moines is the services that are available. Broadlawns was always our go-to for years and years and years. It was the only show in town. Lutheran Hospital has certainly stepped up their game. Turned out to be great partners, great facility. They do great work for us. Then the Unity Points and the Mercy of the world, they're getting into this space because they know it's not going away. So we have an advantage here in Central Iowa, and we just need to take advantage of those partners.
And I'll just make one quick point, is we're doing this in seeing the need and unfortunately expansion of that need. It's very unfortunate that we see the state stepping away from the mental health hospitals that are out across the state that have been there and for whatever reason are now defunded and closed.
Yeah, and that's, one of the kind of the go-tos in our building is always control the things you can control. And I think the city and the county have done just that in this space. So if we take care of our business, we can show that model to others and encourage them to jump on board. But we're in a good space, and we have terrific partners.
Do we have transport options besides ambulance for people in mental health crisis?
Yes, we do. So if it's somebody that's violent that we need to take to Lutheran or Broadlawns, we can provide that transportation, have the clinician come with us. If it's somebody that's not at that level but still needs some inpatient treatment, if you will, or some options there, the vehicles that we've provided with our clinicians are outfitted so they can transport themselves. So they don't necessarily need us there.
Okay, so the mobile crisis can transport somebody to the hospital or something?
They sure can. But it used to be, it was either going to be a squad car or an ambulance. Well, you can imagine the issue, when, an ambulance, is out of service for that transport and an emergency happens. So we made it a point to provide some training and then outfit the vehicles so our clinicians can do it themselves.
Do we default to mobile crisis if someone if we have the clinician in dispatch on the call realizing somebody needs to go to the hospital like ASAP? Do we default to mobile crisis to transport them, or do we default to ambulance?
If we believe there's a medical issue.
I meant just like suicidal ideation type of stuff.
Yeah, that would be a mobile crisis response,
Okay.
and they'd probably provide the transportation as well.
Okay. And I don't know really where to go with this necessarily. Just the thought is in my head that you're saying we would use a squad car if somebody was violent, but then we just we pass them off at the hospital.
Yeah, the hospitals are all equipped to deal with that. They have not only the security staff, but There are people that may need medication to be calmed down. They may be off their medication. And the good thing is, between Unity Point, Mercy One, Lutheran, and Broadlawns, they now have an interconnected database where, let's say, they ended up at Broadlawns, but they generally go to Mercy or generally go to Lutheran. Broadlawns just pull it up and say, okay, here's the diagnosis, here's the medications they're on, here's what we need to do for them.
That's great.
Having them all intertwined, just another advantage of being in central Iowa.
Chief, I know that you've got some other folks here that need to make a couple of updates and reports, and so I know Councilmember Shoemaker may have some more questions. Maybe you could. Okay.
Are they in a pursuit vehicle or are they in something else?
No, they're in an SUV that's unmarked, so just looks like a regular vehicle. However, they have our mobile data units in that vehicle, so they can see where we are if they need help, and we can see where they are if they need help. So they have a trip log on their screen. They can see the trips. They can say, well, I see, here's a mobile crisis script. Let me jump that. Relay that through our communication center. That way we're all on the same page. We all know where everybody's at. So,
yep.
Okay. Right, briefly, I want to hit the 30 by 30 initiative. Again, this is 30% of the workforce in our department being female by the year 2030. So we made, 2030, 30. I'll be long. I think I'll be retired in 30. So this is a national initiative that we signed on to. This is important. We recognize the value. We also recognize areas of improvement within our organization. So we made some progress on this. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights briefly. I met with the committee last week. Through the BRC process, we were able to take a significant jump. There was money allocated for our budget in our uniform allowance. Here we are in 2023, and you have like one vendor out there in uniform land that actually provides a female cut in trousers and shirts. This, to me, is crazy. So we had to make an adjustment there to allow us access to that vendor. Also, some of the equipment that we carry, particularly the belts themselves and how they fit, how they wear, are different for male and female employees, so we're able to make that adjustment. Last week, we were notified that that went through, and the orders have been placed. So we're making some progress there. Our academy is not ideal. If you've ever been through it, you probably understand that. We had a locker room out there we run an academy class. I think the last class we had 7 female recruits in there. Our locker room was built probably in the 60s, whenever they quit using cement block walls. But the locker room for the females out there had 2 showers that were built in the 50s that were literally 21 inches wide. Totally unacceptable. We had lockers in there that were original. This is male and female side. The male side has 6 showers. Same thing. We have lockers that we give them equipment and equipment bags, and we provide them a locker that your equipment bag won't fit in. It was kind of a running joke. So we were authorized, we're not going through a complete remodel, but authorized money through the city manager to bring that up to speed. So right now, our academy, the locker room area is under construction to make those facilities adequate for the folks that are going through our academy. That was kind of one of the priorities for this committee. The current facility we have, the men's locker room, is kind of a joke. The women's locker room is completely unacceptable. But there are some things on the horizons where we're not really ready to make a big investment in that, and maybe we can do it right here in the near future. So made some progress on that. On the recruiting trail, the discussion was a more directed effort towards female applicants. They have a plan of attack for that. We have a recruiter who's one of our officers who did this for 20 years in the military. So he's got a lot of connections. A lot of our female employees are taking it upon themselves to do some of that recruiting. In fact, Major Miller will be making a road trip here. She has a couple prospects down in Lincoln, Missouri. At Lincoln University. So we view recruiting as a participation sport. So everybody in the building should be involved in it, but we've invested a lot of money to more of a direct target towards those female employees. We didn't have a lot of success last time. We had 48 recruits in the process. None of them made it past the civil service interview, so that committee is now, in conjunction with HR, taking a deep dive into at what point in the process did we lose them. Was it at the initial testing? Was it at the physical agility? Was it at the background? Was it at the polygraph? See if we can narrow that down. If there's something consistent in there where they're falling off, we'll take a hard look at what adjustments do we need to make to that portion of it. Obviously, that'll depend a lot with the Civil Service Commission, a discussion with them. But also, if it's at any point in the testing phase, what preparation, what tutoring, maybe a boot camp, what can we do to get them over that hump? So all that's being analyzed. Nothing's off the table in terms of what we're willing to do towards this. So a lot of energy, some progress being made, but something we need to keep our foot on the gas.
Scott or the chief, is this is part of what's going to be involved in our request from 21CP to investigate culture of the department?
Yeah, if there's any gender issues, obviously those will come up.
For like the existing officers?
Yes.
And okay.
Questions, comments, suggestions? Appreciate your time. Next, we'll go with Captain Ramey, I guess.
Mayor, City Manager, Council members, Captain Josh Ramey. I'll briefly go over the Ethos climate survey that we went through, along with a lot of other city departments. Some of our highlights or takeaways from that survey, some of our mental health solutions, the ongoing stuff that we've done, have had a positive impact through that survey, reduced mental health stigma within the department. Also identified that our lower morale is driven by a perceived lack of support from those in authority, lack of community support, and the current political climate. From those, with Ethos, we went through some opportunities we felt the organization had to push forward a little bit. As far as enhancing morale, we want to amplify visibility and support from citywide administration. Took a brief look at reimagining recognition within the department, how awards work within our own organization. And then we talked a lot about how do we foster community in our organization, and then also intentional communication. How do we re-energize the why, what, and how of the police department to our employees? And how do we enhance that communication? As we went through several meetings with the Ethos team, the chief tapped me to chair what we call the solutions team. So we took some of these, what I call opportunities, formed a committee, and started working through these with people in the organization. As we went through that, communication kept coming up, which is obviously a struggle for us in a 24/7 environment with almost 500 employees working around the clock. As we went through a lot of these problems, we landed on structured mentoring as a solution to tackle all these. Mentoring was something that about 6 years ago, when I went through Northwestern School of Police Staff and Command, was an idea I had for new sergeants. I brought it to Chief Wingert, and he said, do it, let's go. We created an administrative manual for the new sergeants, and then went through some kind of talking points of leadership, management, ideas. So for the last 6 years, I personally sat down with each new sergeant went through these things with them prior to them actually taking the promotion. This program will expand that. It will make it structured. It will also apply to all ranks from sergeant to captain. So we'll pair people up prior to their promotion. We'll have mentors picked, and we'll provide them with a mentor should they want one. Some of the benefits that we came up with through our committee, a big benefit is sharing organizational knowledge. For us, as you get different experiences as a supervisor or commander, you transfer around the department and you get exposure to different things, procurement, patrol, narcotics, SWAT operations, incident command. I'm currently in the communications center, which is a place in 22 years I've never worked. Wonderful opportunity for me to learn how that section works. How do we do that without transferring people around? Mentoring is one of those ideas. We can share that organizational knowledge within our building to the other leaders as they progress through the ranks. Aids with the development also helps with succession planning. Some of the other things that we kind of landed on as, I guess, expectations or things that will benefit from this, help build rapport, offer guidance, build confidence, provide resources. That can be something within the city that can be tough to access at times. Where do I go to get help with these problems? So we're going to provide them with a person to help give them that guidance. Also, another big portion of this will be build relationships and networking. As we pick these mentors and mentees, how we assign them, we'll pick them outside of existing social networks within our building. I've been afforded the opportunity to work with several people throughout the police department. There's people, and I'll use Major Miller as an example. I've never had the opportunity to work for Major Miller. She would be a good mentor for me because we've never had that experience within the police department, and I've never been under her command. There's other people within the police department that I have been under their command, and maybe they wouldn't be the best opportunity for me personally to receive a mentor. So we'll look at some of those existing kind of social networks within our organization and assign them outside of that network. So hopefully we can create some internal networking within the police department through this mentoring program. We started with this new list of sergeants. So we have 3 that are currently assigned mentors. Once we go through the other ranks, lieutenant and captain, we'll pick mentors for those ranks and assign those out. Our policy is currently in the policy committee, so that should be coming out soon and be finalized and be within department policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. As the chief said, I'm Sergeant Brian O'Donnell. I'm the accreditation manager under the direction of Major Miller, headed up the accreditation process for CALIA. I understand that you guys probably have a high-level understanding of CALIA. I just wanted to briefly talk about what the CALIA process entails for the department, what it's going to mean for us going down the road, and where we currently stand in that process. So CALIA stands for the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and it was created in the late 70s. It's a conglomeration of 4 high-level executive agencies, international associations of chief of police, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, National Sheriff's Association, and the Police Executive Research Forum. So these agencies have come together and set these established standards that are required for us to meet accreditation. There's 182 standards that we have to meet. We are currently seeking the basic law enforcement accreditation, and all of these standards are based on best practices in current policing. So this commission that runs the CALIA, it's made up of 21 members. Half of those are law enforcement practitioners, and the balance of those are made up of the private and public sector, such as city council members, city managers, attorneys, judges, professors. So you get an understanding from everybody as far as the best input of what best practices are in policing. This accreditation, I believe, is going to give us a measure of where we stand, because since it is based on best practices, we can show whether or not we are meeting these standards, and if we don't meet these standards, we're not going to receive our accreditation. The goal is currently that we'll meet the standards and requirements for the basic accreditation, and at some point, hopefully down the road, look at getting accredited for our academy as well as our communications as well. Currently, there's 11 agencies in Iowa that are law enforcement accredited with CALEA. Locally, we have Clive, Urbandale, West Des Moines, Iowa DPS. Waukee is currently going through a self-assessment as we are. But less than 5% of agencies nationwide are CALEA accredited. So this truly is an elite accreditation and something to be proud of, and for us to hang our hat on if we can meet these accreditation standards.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you see as the difference between the agencies that we see that are accredited? You said there were 11 agencies and some nearby ones. What is the difference in an agency that's accredited versus not accredited?
So like the ones that are accredited locally or just in general?
Yeah, I mean like as a touch point.
So I think, as I said, this is the way for us to measure. I mean, unless we can see where we stand against these standards, we don't know how to, I guess, rank ourselves or place ourselves against another agency. West Des Moines, who's been accredited for some time, they're obviously meeting all the standards. Urbandale's advanced accredited, so they're meeting over 460 some standards. So we can sit there and say how our policies are different because there's different requirements based on the citizens that you're providing services to, the needs of the community. But these standards are across the board. So that's how we can see how we measure ourselves. How do we meet this standard versus how Urbandale's meeting this standard? So even though our policies might look different and how we react to certain situations might be different, we both have to meet that standard no matter what it might be.
Is there data sort of like on outcomes of agencies that are accredited and how those change?
So CALEA is very data-driven. They're very analysis-focused. That was one of the hopes under this project, is that we would have a data analysis unit and have a data analyst that staff there where we could analyze the data that we bring in, because as you all know, part of the Public Works LLC report said that not only are we not collecting adequate data, but we're not doing analysis on that. Yes, part of this, because CALEA is so data-driven and analysis-driven, the hope is through this accreditation that these analyses that will come out, that we will have comparative data that we can bring up against other agencies.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You said two things: academy and communications.
Yes, sir.
Is that just because of the facility?
So at this point, that was actually a recommendation from CALEA when, so it's called the Triarch Award, where you'd receive all three. That was our hope that we would do that initially. CALEA actually came back and said that's a lot to bite off at once. For basic accreditation, we have 3 years to complete this process. And I'll talk about the timeline here in a second. The hope is hopefully it would be shorter than that, but once we can get this under our belt and understand the process, what it's going to take for us to get there, facility-wise, personnel-wise, that we'll be able to move forward on these other accreditations as well.
All right, thanks.
And maybe we don't have an answer to this yet, but is there a plan for the academy to go into the Nationwide building? I know it's still years down the line, but that is the plan.
That's what's being looked at.
Okay.
So there's a lot of analysis that goes into that, but that would be nice if we can get that to work.
Okay.
But that's not years, right?
Well, yes.
A year or?
No, it's definitely years, because once we decide the space is appropriate and we think that we can afford the remodeling, and because there would be extensive rehab that would still be necessary, figure out what those priorities are to who moves to Nationwide to that building first. It would still take a year of construction to get that done, or a year of design and a year of construction done. So, yeah. 3 years would be probably the right. Yeah.
So for the basic accreditation, as I stated, there's 182 standards that we're going to have to prove that we meet. And that touches every facet of the department, from the administration side to policy side to operation side, down to every unit in the department. So the big thing that CALEA is heavy on is making sure that we have written directives in place that guides our officers and lays those expectations for our officers as far as what their job is, and holds the department accountable, the administration accountable, to make sure that those policies are in place so our officers know exactly what's expected of them. The advantage of that is also the public transparency, being able to show the public what our policies are, and lays that expectation for the public as well. So not just our officers knowing what they have to do when they're out on a call, but what the public expects from service from the Des Moines Police Department. As far as the timeline of what's expected, we became enrolled at September 23rd of 22. We have 36 months to complete our initial accreditation. My hope is that we can get that completed by November of 24. So just over 2 years is my goal. There's several steps that have to take place. The very first thing and most important is that we get our written directives and policies in line with what the current standards are based on best practices, and that we get those put in force. Major Miller is going to discuss 21CP. That has kind of condensed our timeline, which will push us forward much quicker on CALEA. But hopefully the goal is in the next couple months that we'll have all of our policies updated. We can then start showing proof of compliance to these standards, hopefully by the end of the year, have those proof of compliance complete, and then move into the assessment phase of CALEA. CALEA requires a remote assessment where they'll come in and look at our policies. They'll look to show that we can show proof of compliance to those policies, and then they'll do an on-site assessment. My goal is next summer or so that we'll have that on-site assessment. They'll send out assessors. They'll come in and look at our facilities, look how we do day-to-day operations. And then they have a public forum hearing. It used to be done in person. They just changed the standard on this in January, so now they're going to have a public forum that's done through a website. It'll be a public portal. We're going to post that on the city website, on the departmental webpage, and that'll allow for the public to provide input into the process and any other concerns, accommodations that the public might have for the department. As far as the challenges that I foresee, the big thing, as I kind of already stated, is our data collection and the analysis on that. Because CALEA is so heavy on the analysis portion, the hope is that we do get somebody that can come in and look at our data and analyze the data. As I've gone through the standards and looked and read through the Public Works LLC report, we actually do a decent job at collecting data. The problem is it's housed in so many different systems that don't integrate with each other. There's no way to analyze that data, to talk to each other. So the hope is with the governance committee that we're currently going through right now that we can find ways to remedy this and have better ways to analyze the data that we collect. So in regards to what it's going to mean for the Des Moines Police Department, obviously the change of facilities will be a big hurdle for us. That's another reason why the hope is to have this completed by November of 24. Also with any leadership that might change during that time frame, the sooner that we can get this done and then move on to the other accreditation awards will benefit the department, and hopefully maybe at some point look at doing an advanced accreditation. Urbandale is currently law enforcement advanced accredited. I certainly think that's something that our department could handle as well. And again, provides us that opportunity to show the public what our policies are, that we're meeting these standards, and then give that expectation to the public for what they expect to receive from our department. Any questions?
Thank you. Let's move along.
You talked about 460 versus 182 standards between basic and advanced.
Yes, sir.
So what are some of the things that, because I assume we're doing some of those things that are in the advanced. It's just a question of going through the full process, but what are some of the differences between?
Right. So, so the accreditation process is intended for a department of a small size all the way up to Chicago Police Department is CALEA accredited. As you move into the advanced ones, those are going to be ones for larger departments that have more of a focus, specialized focus when it does come to mental health, when it does come to specific response and use of force reporting, and when you might have software data that might be available to a larger department with a larger budget that a smaller agency might not be able to afford. So they're not going to meet that standard because they don't have a way to analyze data the way a large department might be able to that has those software programs.
Thank you.
So what kind of data analysis does Urbandale have?
So the big thing that CALEA requires is data analysis on use of force, vehicle pursuits, cost analysis and budgetary concerns. Those are the major analysis. Like, so we have a software program that does track use of force data very well, but we don't do enough analysis, in my opinion, on that use of force. So that's where it's going to push us to understand the data better and then better allocate resources when it does come to policing.
Are there areas that we can sort of partner with them to say we're not going to go for that whole 460 or, the whole plus accreditation, but we want to sort of meet the standard or expand our standard in some of these areas?
So we're actually, even though we know we don't have to meet these advanced standards, we're actually have our eye on that. And as we're tailoring our policies, we're actually tailoring them to meet the advanced standards already. Because the hope is if we do go to that advanced accreditation, we're already going to be, we're already going to meet most of those standards that are required of it. So we want to set ourselves up for success. Even if we don't do the advanced accreditation, I believe having the policies in place that meet that. That's what the whole purpose of this is not just to have the accreditation award, but to actually advance the department into better practices. So yes, by pushing our policies to meet standards, even though we don't have to meet it, many of these, I would say probably 60 to 70% of them we already meet on the advanced accreditation.
And is there collaboration with other accredited departments like you were talking about Chicago? Because Urbandale, nearby, but not necessarily comparable in the same way that a city would be, not necessarily Chicago's comparable to us, but that another city would be. Is there sort of like a program of being able to communicate with those?
Yes, there is. So we're assigned a regional program manager.
Gotcha.
Tim Basinger is the CALEA staff member that we report to. But there's also what we call a PAC. It's the Midwest PAC. It includes states from Missouri all the way up to Canada, because it's actually an international accreditation award. Canada and Mexico is included as well. So we include, I think, 8 or 9 states plus territories in Canada, and agencies that are currently going through accreditation or currently accredited. Iowa DPS being one of them. Sherry Polson, the director over there, she actually heads up this PAC. So we meet on a quarterly basis. There's conferences that happen 2 to 3 times a year where they will update standards, because just like policies, the standards are constantly evolving. The commission will meet, update the standards. We then meet with the PAC and our regional program manager, discuss those changes, and then we can collaborate with these agencies. So if we're not meeting one of the standards, we can discuss with another agency similar to us, similar to our size, similar to how we operate, and see how they do things. And in fact, we've molded many of our policies based on other accredited agencies.
And when updating the standards, are accredited, I might have missed if you said this, are accredited departments involved in updating those standards?
That's all done by the commission. So
Okay.
the commission will meet 2 to 3 times a year. Part of our assessment after the on-site assessment is we'll actually go in front of the commission, and there'll be a commission hearing. That'll be at one of the conferences, but during that conference, the commission will also meet and discuss any standards that need to change.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. One quick question, just reference to Councilmember Shoemaker's analysis that Urbandale may not be exactly like Des Moines. What's the level of calls for service that Urbandale has per week or per month compared to Des Moines?
I don't know their exact calls for service,
We are.
Yes.
And they are 300? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So a lot of our conversations are going to kind of overlap, which is kind of good. So with I'm going to start with 21 CP and just kind of give you an idea where we are in progress of getting that into place. We're having regular communications, which is really good. I've started uploading a lot of our general orders and other documents so that they have those things to look at prior to their assessment. And speaking to Catherine Olson, she's one of our, what do you call, lead maybe for our project. They're going to begin doing some virtual forums and interviews with our external partners, and she's going to begin doing that on the 30th of this month. So they're going to start doing those things. Catherine, has contacted our department just to get, and city manager, and provided some external partners and stakeholders for us. So they're going to start doing some virtual meetings for those. With 21 CP, it's going to also help us in our progress, like Sergeant O'Donnell said, and getting all of our documents and special orders, general orders, standard operating procedures, getting all those in place for our accreditation as well. So in doing these, they're kind of overlapping, which again, like I said, is going to be helpful for us as an agency. 21 CP, we're just moving right along. So they have a timeline. I believe their timeline has been adjusted a little bit. Is that?
Yeah, summer.
Okay, so they'll finish up in the summer, but I'm uploading. I uploaded from our general orders. Catherine got a hold of me. She could not access them, so I'll have to upload in a different way. I've got to download them now and then upload them so that their system will allow her to have access to that information. So I'll begin finishing that up. Our general orders has almost been completely amended and ready for review. I think we have about 9 chapters still that we're working on, but 21 CP is very understanding of that. So the chapters that we're still working on, I'll just indicate to them that they're still in progress, and then they'll, just kind of wait on looking at those. I want to say that they're probably going to come here to Des Moines. 21 CP is that probably February, or some dates that they're looking at in February.
I believe it was late February at this point.
What's an example of an order, I guess? I don't
General order is how we operate, so how the every agency, every unit in the department, how it operates. Our standard operating procedures are more specific to a unit. So my division would have its own standard operating procedure. Operations, which is patrol, would have their own standard operating procedure. Right. But anything that everyone in the department does, there's rules and regulations on how we conduct that, and that's in our general orders.
Okay.
Does that? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So 21 CP, moving right along. I don't think that we have, there no glitches in that. Everything seems to be moving really well with that. Is that a hand? Yes.
When are community conversations going to be? You said external partners and stakeholders. I'm assuming that's not like community conversations?
There are. So she's going to, right now they're going to do virtual ones. So those are interviews and focus groups is what she's looking at doing first. Then they will come to Des Moines and do some person-to-person. So they'll do some in-person of those as well. But they'll contact or reach out to stakeholders, both internal and external, to do and set those up. Those won't be set up through us, the police department. That'll be set up.
Who qualifies as a stakeholder?
Yeah.
So those
pretty much
are
anyone. Go ahead.
Yeah, those are targeted individuals, and the consultants, 21 CP, asked for the full range of partners to dissenters or those that have oftentimes come to the council.
Yeah, but you're going to talk to other neighborhood leaders and,
Yes.
and things like that
Yes.
that maybe don't come to the podium, but have a strong feeling of how our police department is being ran. Correct?
Yes. I think I gave them several, like 4 different community leaders and neighborhood association presidents.
So they've already identified.
Yes, and in fact, the work that Public Works LLC did in their outreach, we provided those names and contacts as well. So they have a very robust, full-scale, full spectrum of supporters and not so much supporters.
Is there a way that we can see who they're reaching out to and maybe make recommendations? I think Councilman Gatto might also want to do that.
I would actually.
I don't need it. That's getting way too far in the weeds for this council or anyone sitting up here.
Well, I think also to
I'm going to leave that up to the group and to the manager.
Yeah, we'll-
21CP will also have some conversations with council members. So I think at that point, if you had something you wanted to express or share with them, I think.
No, I just wanted to see who they were talking to, who they identified.
I'd prefer to actually take any names from you and contacts you'd like to make
Okay,
sure
that
are
works
involved,
too.
and then
That
I
works
can
too.
share them with them.
Okay.
So I think that's my update with 21CP is that things are just moving along.
Conversation with some of the elected officials?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Then that's by their request, so that's part of what they do. As a matter of fact, when they come, they want to, I don't know if they'll attend a full city council meeting, but they're aware of when city council meets, and so they wanted to know about meetings that they could attend and or be aware of. So I think they do a full spectrum. I think it's going to be voluntary, but I think those will be done in like a focus group. Is that correct, City Manager?
Actually, they're going to allow for Zoom if that's easier for council, and when they're in person, they'll get with as many of you as possible at that point.
So I'm going to move next to Public Works LLC and kind of give my update as to where we're at. Excuse me with the glasses. I had a little surgery done of my eye, so I need my glasses for distance, but up close, which is usually the opposite for people, right? Okay, so I'm taking those off so I can read up close. As you all know, there are like 23 areas of interest with Public Works LLC. The police department is moving along really well in accomplishing those 23 areas of interest with Public Works LLC. We've began collecting more data on our stops, doing warning citations. As Sergeant O'Donnell mentioned, a big portion of both 21CP and Public Works LLC is not just collecting the data, but having it analyzed. And we don't have a data analyst yet, and so hopefully that is on the horizon. But that's going to be a big part of what we need to do in order to fulfill a lot of these requirements. So we have the information, we have the data, we just need to have someone who is capable of analyzing that, and that can't be a sworn person. I don't think that was the spirit of what Public Works LLC wanted. I don't think they wanted me, police major, to analyze our data. I think they wanted someone outside of us to do that, but someone that works close with the police department so that we would have a couple of data analysts in the police department so that they could understand the data that they're actually analyzing. But as far as some of the other things here on the list, we've taken a really close look at our public information, or the information that goes out to the public and the requests for that information. We've revamped that process, and I think we're just moving along really well on this list of items to do. And again, like I said, a lot of this will overlap. So some of what Public Works is looking for, 21CP is also going to request of us, and CALEA it'll be part of our CALEA standard as well. So does anyone have any questions about anything specific on the public request of information? So when people request, yes, open records, yes, sir. Yes.
So you had said that our systems, do we have the system to analyze, and it sounds like it doesn't connect?
So our systems are creating some of our issues right now. So we have the new Tyler system that is not, it's not functioning the way
you would have hoped.
Yes.
Well, we've noticed that at the neighborhood meetings, where we can't get any statistics.
Right, we're missing some big pieces that we use on a day-to-day basis. Crime mapping,
Yes.
That's what you're looking for statistic-wise, crime mapping, and even just the overlapping of some of the other processes that we use that we had prior to the new system that we're not able to get to function for us right now. And I know that Anna Whipple is working extremely hard with Tyler to try to get a lot of these things resolved. Anna Whipple is IT for the
why
city.
did we switch if the other information, I mean, it was pretty readily
outdated.
available.
I can jump in there. So
Sorry. I just know that that's been an
I was
issue.
just trying to tie how you can get credit when your systems don't.
So I know something near and dear to all your hearts is the neighborhood meetings and the crime mapping and the stats. So,
Yes.
as of last week, when we had a leadership meeting on this, that became the priority for Tyler and Director Whipple. So we have to get that piece shored up, not just for your sake. We use it every single day. I mean, that's kind of how we allocate resources and do our business. So I don't want to say the failure with the Tyler system, but the hiccup with the Tyler system, this has been going on for 3 years. The RFP process, Tyler has a very robust system. It will capture information, report out information, allow us to analyze information, to allocate resources. It's got all the bells and whistles that we need. Unfortunately, we had a project manager in our building assigned to lead this project. About 6 months before this project launched, he left and took the job as the IT director in Grimes. That's a problem for me, because if I'm supposed to manage this project, that's not going to work very well, because I'm not an IT guy. I can barely check my email. So this thing went, this project continued, and it launched April? It launched in April, and we didn't have that managerial oversight from the IT perspective to manage it. So Director Whipple and her staff were scrambling to, try and fill in the blanks of the actual expert that drove this project and built it from the ground up. So we had we had an expertise and a management void that was simply created by an employee leaving and taking another job. So now we're kind of scrambling, to get the pieces that aren't working. We have a leadership committee assigned to that includes us, IT, and they're making a priority list of things that some things our IT department can take care of, some things are a Tyler issue. We have law enforcement partners that are part of this as well. Polk County is on this same system, so they're assisting us through these struggles and, quite frankly, losing their patience. Because Polk County also has partners that they supply this system to, such as Pleasant Hill and Altoona. So everybody's in the same boat with the struggles, and everybody assumes that same frustration. So we just, between us and IT, put a team together and said, okay, these are the issues. We need to prioritize them, and we need to just plow through this list. So I think we have a plan of attack moving forward, but that was the hiccup with the Tyler system. It was simply an expertise void based on an employee leaving.
So do you have another employee in place now, or can we send out a contract and have someone step in that's an expert and help with some of these issues?
Yeah, my understanding is they've already interviewed, and so they're in the choosing stage of the new staff.
Yeah, in the meantime, they have backfilled positions in our department to provide that. This is the support we need to be operational. But there's frustration kind of on all levels, but I think everybody that's using the system, that knows about the system from the line level, all the way to the command staff, knows that this product, when working right, will be robust and exactly what we need. We just got to get over that hump. We lost the expertise at the worst possible time.
Okay.
I wanted to ask kind of on that last point that you just made, even though we're at this sort of wall right now with Tyler and operations, besides getting back to where we were and getting the things back that we had, do you anticipate that there's room for expansion to get to the points that were in the Public Works report of all the data points that they made and the comparisons to or the best practices, recommendations, comparisons to other cities, other programs? Do you think that we're going to have the capacity after we get past this roadblock?
That's what Tyler is designed to do.
Okay.
It took us from, our old system was an Intergraph product called iLeads. It took us from the baseline of just gathering information, housing information, accessing information, to actually being able to produce data and reports that can then be analyzed. That's why we chose Tyler.
Okay, it adds that analysis
Yes, it
option.
does.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes, Charles, go ahead.
Yes, so when you get data analysts on board, and were there 2 or 3 that were thinking this?
They're not. No.
Oh.
Unfortunately, those are not data analysts specific to the police, because we need to get data engineers in there first.
Okay.
And those.
Well, so then when you get eventually to the point of having a data analyst or more, will those people work in the police department but be part of the IT department? Have you, that's been discussed, the best
I
way
think,
to have.
yeah, best practice would be, and best for the police department and the person who's trying to analyze the data would be if they were housed in the police department.
But part of IT.
No.
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 Okay.
They would obviously spend time with IT as needed, but I would see this housed in the police department and possibly a couple other departments as we grow into it. This would be the first priority, though.
But they're not.
But they need to.
Right.
Okay. No.
Right.
No.
Gotcha.
No.
Yeah. Right.
And they're going to work pretty hand in hand with the crime analyst and some of the other positions that already do exist in the police department.
And we're not to the point of having a job like that posted yet, are we? Or
No. Again, we have to create the centralized piece first so that we have the knowledge on the engineering side, unfortunately. And I can come back with another presentation I think would make the most sense. Because we have to have the foundation built first, and we got the consultants involved to understand how you build this properly.
But can't those base people that you're going to hire roll into those other positions? Or we're going to hire 3 positions to be the foundation and the kind of what you're talking about, and they're still going to stay on board, and then we're going to hire someone else to do that. They can't transition into that?
How easy it is to hire all those positions? I mean, that's why I'm just kind of concerned.
Very difficult.
So
Very
is it
difficult.
something?
And to keep and retain is the other issue. So that's why we're currently trying to hire 5 different positions, 6 positions, I believe, in IT.
And we can't subcontract this out.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Is there people that
someone that's has the expertise of doing this to get a quicker
No.
result, and then we don't have them consistently.
Not on the data analyst piece, because that's...
but I'm talking about right now of the folks that you want to put additional folks in IT. I think you call them directors.
Engineers, yeah.
So we can't go hire a firm and do an RFP and get them folks working on this, and then we can hire the analysts to work full time that we know we need in these different departments, and then we're not hiring 9 people. And
No, the answer is unfortunately no. We can have consultants help us to set up a system initially, but the systems are all changing, and part of the engineer's responsibility is going to be making sure the different systems are actually communicating with each other. And so at that level, it needs to be centralized, and it is a different expertise. And again, because the systems themselves are changing, it's best practice to have that individual on staff.
I'd like to go back to one of the first points you were made about the Public Works implementation. Collecting data by using warnings concerns me a little bit, just because I'm worried that on the impact on the people being stopped versus previously not getting, I want to collect data on all the stops, but it concerns me that someone is receiving a warning, and how does that affect them, and what is our system for warnings? Does a warning guarantee that the next time you're stopped that you're going to be arrested or something like that?
No, that's not how a warning is. So a warning is actually, could technically just be a traffic stop, right? So warnings are only issued in lieu of a citation. So when an officer has a traffic stop, they have discretion on whether or not. So currently, before we had the written warnings, which a lot of the agencies around us was already doing written warnings, we were giving verbal warnings as opposed to writing a ticket. I might just say to you, you have a tail light out. And so there's nothing written, nothing documented. And what Public Works LLC requested is that, how do we track, or how do we know that we're doing those warnings? Because there was no tracking mechanism for those. So we then, Tracks system, which is what we do our citations in, already had the capability of us to provide a written warning. Iowa State Patrol, they do written warnings as well. So if I give you a warning, it doesn't say, yes, your traffic light is out now, and next time if I see you and your traffic light's out, I'm going to for sure give you another citation. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I'm wondering,
No.
if an officer sees a list of warnings on someone's account, if it's going to be a problem for them.
Well, I mean, I guess that would probably be, I mean, if you've had a tail light out for 3 months, you know, and you've had warnings, I don't think that I'm going to give you another warning, and that would just be my discretion. But if you've been warned 10 times about the same headlight, you know, that is a citation, and it's capable of a citation before that warning. But it doesn't say to me, it won't say to me that I have to give you a citation, right? It doesn't say, because I see a lot of warnings on when I pull up your, and warnings don't stay in. How long do they stay? A warning doesn't stay. Yeah, I'm not.
There's no implications on the driving record.
Okay.
It doesn't say it on your, when you call in my driver's license, it says that
It doesn't say anything about your
gave me
warning.
a warning
No.
for an expired plate. It doesn't say that.
It does not.
Okay. And is there other reporting on the stop of this is everything that happened during the stop? Like, is there a report made by the police officer of everything that happened during the stop?
It would be just like any other traffic citation. So there's no, are you asking if there's a report made?
Yes.
No, there's no actual police report made during a citation, a traffic stop.
Okay, so there's no documentation of sort of like how that played out, you know, how.
We write, either we write an actual citation or
Or a
now the written warning.
But there's no documentation of like, I stopped these people while we were stopped on the side of the road for a certain amount of time. I asked them to come out of the car. I searched the car, like things like that.
There's body camera and, body camera, video. There's also, you know, when I go out on a traffic stop, I indicate that to dispatch. And so there's a tracking mechanism, so the dispatch will know how long I was on that traffic stop. Are you asking that? That's not something that I write up, though.
Right. It's a matter of being able to track, like, because we're taking this information and we're taking race data as well with the taking information on traffic stops, correct? And so being able to determine like what happens, like not just how many stops or how many warnings or how many citations are given to certain populations of people, but also what happens on those traffic stops. Is it, oh, I gave you a warning because of taillight and you went on your way for 15 minutes, or is, oh, I saw that you had a taillight out and also I'm going to search your car because I see dirt on the ground and I think that's, you know, shake or something like that.
That's kind of you said I see dirt on the ground, but I think it's shake. I don't.
Sorry, it's
Okay.
just, I'm saying, how does,
Hey,
how,
if you got weed in your car and you're driving around.
Joe, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, okay, thank you. I'm saying how do we know what is happening on the traffic stops to different populations if we don't have reports on that?
Yeah, there's some documentation. There's body camera. Every traffic stop can be then gone back and taken a look at. So there is documentation.
So it's linked to the traffic stop. The body camera footage is linked.
The body camera footage would explain exactly what happened.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to analyze that, we would need someone to go through all of the individual traffic stops and analyze all the body camera footage. So it's not super efficient.
No, that's not the
it's not.
intent of
Right.
the idea here was to separate out documentation of warnings versus citations.
Right. I just
It
wonder
was
if-
not to dive deep into just the warning aspect.
I wonder if there's a next step of that, just because like when we're talking about like pretextual stops, like is that like being able to track how many pretextual stops that we're having, or like, you know, what's playing out on those stops?
Let's have further conversation on that point, because I think this is actually going to provide quite a bit of insight into that question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Major, thank you very much.
I just have to say, Major Miller, thank you so much. I appreciated the women's conference that was held, and your presentation was so impactful. So thank you.
All right, Mr. Manager, any closing thoughts?
Yes, we did schedule for Monday morning in order to continue the conversation on tall grass. Thank you.
Are you going to have another conversation at all?
I have almost.
All right, to everybody, thank you for attending. This has been a good 3.5, 3 hour and 45 minute meeting. Meeting's adjourned.